All right. Well, good morning. Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for our National Conference on Sustainable Development 2020 Electric School Bus Toolkit. My name is Daphne Dixon, and I'm Executive Director of Live Green. We're so happy that you're all here today. We'd like to start by thanking the Lion Electric Company for being our presenting sponsor. We'd like to thank our platinum partners, Capital Clean Cities and Greater New Haven Clean Cities. We'd like to thank our community partners. We'd like to thank our electric school bus heroes and our participating organizations, Georgetown Climate Center, 350.org, Connecticut Green Bank, National Grid, and VEIC. We're also really excited and thrilled to have a lot of other Clean Cities partners with us here today who are supporting this conference. We'd like to thank Empire Clean Cities, Greater Washington Region, Michigan Clean Cities, Kentucky, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Sacramento Clean Cities, my hometown, Vermont, and Virginia. Thank you so much. Next slide. All right. I'd really like to send some appreciation to our team here at Live Green. This event, this conference was put together with a lot of thought and effort and skill from our team. I'd like to thank Andrea McCarthy, Kelsey McCormick, Abby Winter, Rachel McLaughlin, Callie Katz, Laurel Murphy, and Emily Zimmerman for all their work and all their attention to detail to put this event together today. Next slide. I'd like to talk a little bit about our program today. We're going to talk a little bit about our Electric School Bus Toolkit. This is a program the reason for the conference is to share this toolkit and then to show how electric school implementation is happening all over the country. So we're so excited about showcasing our local champions. That first panel is moderated by Thomas Corman. Then we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to hear how legislative action supports electric school bus adaptation. Then we're going to move into our final panel, which is hearing success stories from across the nation. We're going to hear from California and Michigan and other parts of the nation that are really going for it when it comes to electric school buses. And we have some wonderful, wonderful stories. We're very honored to have Matthew Getz of Georgetown Climate Center doing closing remarks. And then we have a networking reception. And we hope to have you all join us at the networking reception after the conclusion of this conference. I'm going to do some brief remarks about our toolkit program, and then we are so honored and thrilled and grateful that we are going to have Bill McKibben with us giving us opening remarks. So we have so much gratitude for Mr. McKibben for joining us this morning and being a part of our conference. Next slide, please. All right, so the objective of this toolkit, of this conference, to talk about this electric school bus toolkit, really it's for this conference, for this gathering, to be a catalyst for change. What are we waiting for? We need to all take immediate action. There's so much that we can be doing to be getting these electric school buses into place. And we just hope that from what you learned today, from what you see, that you're really going to want to take immediate action. It's great to learn things and to have more knowledge, but it really comes down to action. What can we all do? We want you to know that we have over 200 participants with us here today. We have 25 states that have registered, and we have fleet managers. We have people from DOE, DOT. We have school bus operators. We have a wide range of people representing so many different sectors. And when we were putting this event together, and we did the questions up front, and we asked people what they wanted to learn. It was people want to learn about grants. They want to learn about technology. They wanted to learn about infrastructure. There was hundreds of things that people wanted to learn. And one person said, when I asked, what do you want to learn about this from this conference, they just said everything. And that was really my favorite answer. So there's just so much to learn. Next slide. So a little bit about Live Green and Connecticut Southwestern Area Clean Cities Coalition. So our organization, Live Green, we're headquartered here in Norwalk, Connecticut, and our mission is to integrate the global goals into local, innovative, scalable initiatives that create behavior change. So, education is great. Like I said, we want to educate people, but we really want to move people to behavior change. We want people doing things. We want to see change. We want to see projects that are going to get us where we need to be. One of our initiatives within our nonprofit is an initiative called Connecticut Southwestern Area Clean Cities Coalition. And this coalition, our coalition, is part of a national network that's supported by the Department of Energy's Vehicle Technologies Office. And there's about 100 of these coalitions across the country. And they all have stakeholders that are working directly with fleets across the country and helping those fleet managers transition their fleets to alternative fuels. And one of the programs we have developed within this is this Toolkit program. And why is it? Why is it that we need to? Why do we need this Toolkit program? And why is it so important? All right, if we want to go to the next slide. All right, and so I had emailed out everybody who had registered by 8 o'clock last night a study that was done with a lot of folks and a lot of people involved with it, and it was headed by John Wargo over at Yale University, and it's the Children's Exposure to Diesel Exhaust on School Buses study, and a lot of these comments in here are from that study, and I think if we all look at that study, and there's many other studies about this, if we look at that, we realize that these school buses with these diesel emissions are it's a terrible problem for our air quality. And so this is one of the reasons why we created this toolkit, is to address the air quality issues of the diesel emissions and set. Next slide, please. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide, I believe the next slide talks about how we have these goals, these international, these national, these regional goals that have been put into place by the UN, by the International ZEV Alliance, by the ZEV Task Force, and there are many commitments that we have collectively agreed to so that our country can and our world can get to net zero emissions by 2050. And so this is another reason why we need electric school buses, is we need to make this commitment. We need to reach these goals, and having electric school buses is one way to do that. Next slide. Okay. So electric school buses, there's a lot of barriers to electric school buses. There's the costs, there's, it feels risky, it's not something that everybody does. There's, grants that we have to work through. It's not really in people's job descriptions to get these electric school buses. And I think the one thing that I've seen and heard is that a lot of people, when we're talking to them about electric school buses and trying to explain the benefits, a lot of people they really value doing things the way they've always done, maintaining their diesel buses, and not really thinking, that really what's probably more important are the health and environmental benefits of having electric school buses. And so I think that's one of the barriers is changing culturally our values, is that we really need to value environment and health benefits and let those values drive us towards electric school buses. Next slide. So we created a solution. We created the Electric School Bus Toolkit 6-week program. And we were working with a group of people, and we did a conference and along with Connecticut Energy Network and PACE and a few other groups. And the event was called Clean Transportation for All. And out of that event, one of the offers we had was to invite the people who participated in that conference to join this 6-week program, Toolkit, where they would learn the process of how they could figure out how to get electric school buses into their communities. So this is a 6-week program. We taught people how to build a team, the importance of outreach and education. They learned about the procurement process. They learned about infrastructure. They learned about how to define a project. And they learned about funding opportunities. Next slide. These were some of the metrics from our program. We had 24 towns participate. We had over 36 people from those towns who stayed with the program throughout the whole course of it. And we had 53 program guests. These are people that our participants asked to join in along the way for certain modules. We provided a certificate of completion to towns and participants who completed certain tasks. We had 16 towns identify their decision makers. So now that we can work with these decision makers on educating them on the benefits of electric school buses. And we now have 4 towns as a result of going through this process and things they were also doing on their own. They're going to plan to write a grant for the VW settlements. Applications are going to go forward with a grant. And then there's 16 towns that we've worked together and they want to do some sort of regional grant. So these are some of the metrics from our program. Next slide. So a lot of the value that has come out of this program really is that we have created a process, a consistent process that we believe is replicable and scalable, something that could be done in other regions, other parts of the country, and a consistent program that could be shared. We've created a pipeline for these grant applications, which is something we believe is really important. We were able to connect people to subject matter experts and technology experts so that when they have questions going forward, they now have support and guidance and people that they can call upon for help. And the program really fills a void. There really wasn't, that we know of, there wasn't a program that really got in there and taught people this process. And so we believe that this is a big value, being able to teach people this process of how to facilitate electric school bus procurement. Next slide. This was our certificate of completion. These are the towns that were awarded the certificate. So hats off to all of these towns. We're so proud of everybody for the work they did and the things they learned and the actions that they're taking. Next slide. So that's it. So we have our Electric School Bus Toolkit 6-week program. We're hoping that we can scale this program in other parts of the region, maybe the country. We also have a Municipal EV Toolkit 12-week program, which has a section of school bus in it, but then it also addresses all the other vehicles that can go electric within a community. So if you'd like to learn more about how to have a program like this in your community or your state or your region, please do contact us. And we'd love to talk to you more about that. And we do have our panel coming up, and the panel is filled with stories and examples of how this program has helped communities move forward. And so with that, I would like to turn the turn the microphone over to Erin Russell-Story. She's Northeast Regional Manager for Department of Energy's Clean Cities Initiative. So thank you very much, Erin.
Very great honor to introduce our next speaker, Bill McKibben. Bill McKibben is the founder of the grassroots climate organization campaign 350.org and the Schumann Distinguished Professor in Residence at Middlebury College in Vermont. He was a 2014 recipient of the Right Livelihood Prize, sometimes called the Alternative Nobel, and the Gandhi Peace Award. He has written over a dozen books about the environment, including his first, The End of Nature, published 30 years ago. and his most recent, Falter, has the human game begun to play itself out? So thank you, Mr. McKibben, for being with us today. And now more from Bill McKibben.
Hello there. Can you hear me? I hope. I'm very glad to be joining you from Vermont on this day. And of course, I wish we were all able to join in person. But there's there's something to be said for this world we live in now, where we're learning to communicate in low carbon and effective ways. I want to thank you enormously for the work that you're doing. And I'm just going to take a few minutes to try and put it in a little bit of global context, context around the climate and context around this pandemic that all of us are thinking about and living through. And I wrote the first book about climate change 30 years ago, so I got a long time to think about what's going on. And, where 30 years ago we were offering warnings about what would happen if we didn't take action. Now, sadly, because we didn't take much action, we're offering reports from the front line, and those reports are scary and disturbing every day. We remember that the year began with all of us looking a little slack-jawed as the continent of Australia half burned to the ground. Even as we deal with our remarkable troubles here around the pandemic, across most of Africa now, thanks to climate change, people are dealing with a plague of locusts like they've never seen before. It's wiping out field after field, day after day. So even as we talk, things are bad, and of course things will get very much worse unless we move very quickly. So let's talk about moving quickly. It's why the work that you're doing is so key, and why this is such an interesting moment. There are no silver linings to something as grim and damaging as the pandemic that we're living through. But if we're going to live through it, we might as well learn some lessons along the way. Let me kind of posit for you what those seem to me. I tried to talk a little bit about these on 60 Minutes last week, so I may be repeating myself a little bit if you heard that, but I think there are three lessons that really stand out. The first is just a reminder that physical reality is real. That seems like an odd thing to say, but we live in a world where, we live behind screens most of the time. So it's easy to manipulate and mutate and adjust reality to suit our needs, but it doesn't really work that way. I've spent 30 years trying to convince people that physics and chemistry don't negotiate, that the carbon molecule is going to do what it's going to do, and we have to respect it. And the COVID microbe has done the same thing for biology in the course of a few weeks. Doesn't matter if you get up at your lectern and fulminate against it, it doesn't care. If it says stand 6 feet apart, stand 6 feet apart. That notion about reality is really, really crucial. And it comes with a corollary, which is that speed is really crucial. The US and South Korea found out about the coronavirus on the same day in January, first case. They went to work, flattened their virus curve, disrupted things, tested everybody. They're kind of looking at it in the rearview mirror now. We didn't. We wasted February, and so now we're in the place we're in where we have to disrupt things at a huge level. And even so, lots and lots of people die. It's the worst of all worlds. And it's a perfect analog for what we've been doing around climate change for a very long time. The last 3 decades have been the kind of February of climate change when we ignored the warnings from scientists. So now we have to move quickly. And even as we do, there's a lot of unavoidable at this point trauma. But speed is of the essence. And I think the third message is one that's exemplified by the work that you all are doing, which is that social solidarity really is important. There are problems we can only deal with when we come together to do things, that we really need each other working cooperatively and jointly. Now, one of the things that the pandemic did was remind us of the importance of our lungs. We're very worried correctly about the damage that this microbe does to our alveoli, to all the surfaces of our lungs. So it's worth remembering that there's a lot of other things that damage lungs too. I've spent a lot of time in India because it's an important part of this climate fight and one of the most remarkable countries in the world. Delhi is one of my favorite cities, but the last time I was there, it was almost impossible even to go outside. Air pollution had become so bad. There are 5 million children in Delhi. We think 2.5 million of them have irreversible lung damage simply from breathing the air. Thanks to Americans who stood up 50 years ago at the first Earth Day and passed the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, we no longer face scenes quite like that in the US. Once upon a time, our air was as bad as any place around the world, but we started taking action. But it's way worse than it needs to be. There's no excuse for pouring particulates into our air and making people breathe them, especially because we understand now in ways that we didn't before, and you saw reports of this new study just today, exactly how much damage those particulates do. So if you had an option, which we now do, why would you use old antiquated technology knowing that it damages, well, hell, it damages the kids who we're putting on the school bus to take to school to give them a better life. There's something not working here. The good news is, well, one of the pieces of good news is the engineers have done a hell of a job. You know, even 10 years ago, talking about electric vehicles was difficult. But over the last 10 years, we've lowered the price of a solar panel 90%, a wind turbine 90%. So now we have a big, easy source of clean electricity if we want to put our mind to it. And we've taken engines and made them work miracles on electricity. I drive an electric car. I got to say, I'd drive one even if I didn't care a whit about the planet around me because they're great. They're quiet. There's no or almost no moving parts, and they're cheap to run. What's not to like? And people are figuring that out. Governments are figuring that out. The Chinese have put in place hundreds of thousands, now perhaps 1 million electric buses across the continent, and they've done it in a matter of years. They've moved fast. They've worked speedily, which we could do too. In fact, coming out of this pandemic, we're going to need a lot of ways to put people to work. And putting people to work is one of the best things about the renewable energy, modern technology future. It requires that we put some people to work making this transition into, well, into the future. We should take from our brush with this hideous virus the clue that things aren't always going to go easily or smoothly. Because we've heated the climate, we're likely in for a series of kind of rolling traumas in the years ahead. So we need to reduce the scale of those traumas by reducing the amount of pollutants, carbon that we pour into the atmosphere. And we need to have physical systems that work well when we're dealing with trauma, so that we're not relying on an endless chain of refineries and oil wells and everything else to get us through, so that instead we can rely on the sun and the wind to power the world around us, including moving our bodies to and fro when we need that to happen. So I truly could not be more impressed with the work that y'all are doing. We know that the world's going to look different in the next few years. And the question is, how will it look different? Will we, as we take our back, resume life in our cities, will we all just crowd into old automobiles out of fear and make the place, dirty and smog choked and congested? Or will we, as cities around the world seem to be doing, opt to close off large portions of cities to cars and turn them over to bikes and to buses, to electric buses, to quiet buses? Will we make those choices in town after town around the Northeast, around America, around the world? Will we move quickly in the directions that we could move in. If we do those things, then we've got a chance, not a chance of stopping global warming, that's no longer on the menu, I'm afraid, but of holding it to a place where it doesn't destroy the future going forward. Because when we talk about school buses, that's really what we're talking about, right? We're talking about how we get the most important parts of our society out and around, how we help them prepare for the world that's coming, how we help turn them into the leaders that we will need and that they will need. And so, for a whole long list of reasons, it's a really good idea to put them on an electric school bus to get to work, but maybe to get to school. But maybe the most important of all is just the lesson that it teaches subtly but powerfully every day. A lesson about what the future looks and sounds and feels like. A lesson about how we can take some control of that future, that we're not stuck in the past just out of sheer inertia, that we can deal, that we can go forward. So I thank you so much for the work that you're doing and look forward very much to seeing the fruits of it play out all over this country, all over this world in the very near future, because time is the limit. That's the thing that we've always got to bear in mind. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Mark Scully from People's Action for Clean Energy. I'd like to add my welcome to those from Daphne and Bill. And I want to tell you in for something special this morning. The Electric School Bus Toolkit is a unique creation. I would even go as far as to say it's a model for how to bring a group of engaged citizens together to effect change. You know, we've all taken training courses, we've attended conferences, and of late probably sat through a webinar or two. And if we're, you know, and typically from these we learn a lot. Sometimes we get a certification, and if we're honest, in most cases not a lot comes out of it. The Electric School Bus Toolkit is unique in its focus on action. It was really miraculous to watch a group of strangers from 24 towns over the course of 6 weeks gain the knowledge and confidence to take concrete steps to bring electric school buses to our community. Many of us knew a little bit, or sometimes even a lot, about this topic, but few of us would have been comfortable taking the steps to make it happen. Things like building a local team, informing ourselves about the technology, making contacts with the bus manufacturers, with utility, reaching out to school officials, applying for funding. So it's now up to us, the first graduating class of the Electric School Bus Toolkit, to follow through on this. But the course has given us not only the tools, confidence, electric school buses need us right now. I think we all know the current situation with children sitting on idling diesel and propane buses, causing unthinkable damage to their lungs and to our environment. That has to end. But we also know the economics of electric school buses are challenging, and their take-up has been limited. What we need is champions communities across the country to help demonstrate the value to society of technology. The Electric School Bus Toolkit is the best way I've seen to make it happen. We have the opportunity this morning to hear from a few of these champions. The moderator of our panel, Tom Shorman, is Senior Engineer on the Transportation Product Growth Team at National Grid. In case you don't know, National Grid is one of the largest investor-owned utilities in the country, serving New York, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. During his time at National Grid, Tom has worked on smart grid projects, microgrids, and electric vehicles. Previous to National Grid, he was a consultant for power plant asset transactions, Leidos. He was a market researcher for American Superconductor. Before all of that, a high school physics. That might explain why Tom is such an enthusiast of electric school. Tom will engage this morning with a panel of concerned and dedicated individuals working in their town to promote electric school. Sonia Skindrud is co-chair of the Sustainable West Town Committee and serves on the Sustainable Western Schools. Sharon Hutner is a member of the Electric School Board team, Brantford, Connecticut. Angela Papageorge is Executive Director of Operations at Fairfield Public Schools. So this discussion is about to get real as we hear about the work these folks are doing in their town. Over to our moderator, Tom Shorman.
Thank you, Mark. All right. Hopefully you guys can hear me now. And I'd like to welcome our panel that we have here. My goal today is to ask these wonderful people some questions about their experience with the electric school bus toolkit training that they've received and what their experiences have been in their communities as well. As Mark had said, I work for National Grid, and we have our service territories in New York, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Unfortunately, it's not in Connecticut, but I think we have a few folks from our states that are on this call today. So just want to give a little shout out to our Make Ready program that we have for electric school buses. We're looking to support that area, and specifically to provide the infrastructure for 3 school buses, as well as a portion of the cost of the chargers for those school buses as well. So I know engaging the utility is a part of the whole process that you folks have been going through, and I'm excited to hear what your experiences have been in Connecticut and even beyond engaging the utilities. So I believe we have Sonia, Sharon, and Angeles on the panel here today. So I guess I'll start with maybe Sonia and Sharon and ask you guys, what was your biggest takeaway or aha moment from the Electric School Bus Toolkit program over the last several weeks?
So I can just say that that's a really tough question because the whole program was really, really so valuable. I think the program was really groundbreaking in what appeared, approaching this as an individual or as a task force, community task force, the whole experience of trying to transition to electric school buses is a very complicated and complex proposition. So what the Toolkit program did was really break down the process into digestible concepts and achievable steps that really looked possible for our town. From reaching out to building our team to understanding the collaboration necessary for procurement, what kind of partnerships that entails, understanding the technology options from vehicle to grid to battery storage to solar carports and more. The toolkit really showed us that there is a path for every town that really wants to do this, that every town is unique, but there's a path for each town, and that where there is a will, there is a way. And so the entire program for us in Weston was really instrumental and valuable and is going to propel us forward.
Thank you, Sonia. Yeah, that's great. And something I can say from my experience at the utility is that the only way I've really seen school districts really start to adopt this is sometimes there's an ambitious town or school district, but it's from concerned citizens like yourself, who are organizing. So it's great stuff. So Sharon, how about you? What was your big takeaway?
Well, I have a background in speech language pathology with young children. And so
wow.
I don't have any engineering experience at all. And so the concept of electric school buses was a very new one to me. And so hearing all of the case histories that the school kit brought forth, and to hear about how other towns had done it, made it a reality. And I was able to get excited about it from that point of view. And also, not knowing anything about finance, hearing about the VW funds was another wonderful aha moment in the toolkit, because there was actually funding available and it was being used specifically for electric school buses. So those two things really kind of jump-started my really excitement and enthusiasm about the whole project.
That's great. Yeah, and I think just hearing both of you, some of the parallels I'm taking here are just having things in understandable chunks, and being able to break things down. And, like you said, I don't have a background in how to get financing. And, they sort of gave you some of those tools. That's, as a teacher and as someone, you're in education as well, it's nice to hear that they've provided a good scaffolding structure for that. So it's good stuff. Wonderful. So I'd like to hear some more. I don't know, if you've already started engaging your community, but how has this program helped you both move things forward in your community?
Well, I can say for Weston, this process for us started a long time ago. I serve as our town representative on a county effort that Daphne also leads called Sustainable Fairfield County. And at a meeting last July in 2019, they invited a representative from Massachusetts Clean Cities to talk about the pilot project that they had in Massachusetts in 4 municipalities. And that started the seed for us in our town considering this transition. So I brought that back to our committee, and we decided to take on that issue. We're a committee of resident volunteers appointed by our Board of Selectmen, and so we don't have a lot of bandwidth to take on everything we'd like to, but this was an issue we really thought needs to happen, and sooner than later. And so I committed to being the champion for our town. But it took a long time for me to get the attention of our decision makers, to get them to add this other item to their already incredibly busy agenda. And what really helped over time, a number of things helped, including a lot of Live Green's efforts, putting up different, in fact, this conference, which was originally intended to be a live in-person event, added elements that our decision makers could tap into. But the toolkit itself really gave legitimacy to the efforts that our committee is undertaking. It showed that we're not working in isolation. It really gave emphasis to the importance and the urgency of taking this issue on. So it was very helpful for me to share with my decision makers that this is not just the interest of one individual in town or one committee in town, but the 24 towns in Connecticut have come together to seriously participate and take action to make this change. And after completing the program, I feel like I just have a lot more capacity to answer their decision makers' questions and make connections with experts, as Daphne had mentioned. Another bonus of this for our community has been that Daphne worked with Sustainable Connecticut, that program in our state, to recognize the toolkit and that successful completion of this toolkit program can earn points towards certification for Sustainable Connecticut also. So it really has helped us engage with our decision makers and pushed us forward. And we're a part of, really momentum and a movement now.
That's wonderful. I like to hear how you describe that as it gave some legitimacy around what you're trying to do. It's we all sort of know, okay, this is legitimate, but you got to influence those decision makers, and that's good stuff. Very cool. So yeah, Sharon, I would really like to hear you as well. Tell us how this program has helped you move forward, move things forward with your community. What maybe has been your path to this point so far, and yeah, go ahead.
So it was a wonderful resource for me to have all the information culled together in one place. I mean, each week we were introduced to more information about different subjects, like how an electric bus is made and how a town can put it together an RFP, and what's the difference, why is a electric bus better than diesel or propane. So having all of that information in one place and not having to go all over the web to search it all by myself was really a tremendous advantage. And so from that, I was able to put together a presentation to the Board of Education. And so once I was able to meet before the Board of Education, they were enthusiastically supportive of the idea, as well as our first selectman, which I think is a crucial piece of the whole program. And they decided to appoint one of their board members to our Clean Energy Committee. And that has really facilitated everything, because now we have our board COO, the chief of operations, who also is now enlisted in helping us. And he will be reporting to the board every time they meet about what is going to be happening with this process. So it was really a wonderful way to be able to get the information, and as Sonia said, to know that you can answer questions when people ask it of you and have the accurate information, and then get the support of all the people in our community to really get this underway.
That's great stuff. It sounds like you guys really got some valuable information, and yeah, I mean, that's empowering. You guys must feel like, I know for myself, I mean, I still often have questions that I'm not able to answer, and I am the subject matter expert at my utility for electric school buses. So you guys probably know more than I do, which is great. And that's, you guys seem like you're armed, ready for battle, which is a good thing. So what, when you guys were going through this whole program, I'm going to keep asking some questions about the program, just because, I think it's important for folks to hear, what you gain, and help hopefully convince some folks to think about, this toolkit in the future. Personally, again, as a high school physics teacher, I go back to this all the time. I love well-organized content. It sounds like you guys got that. Was there, and I'll, Sharon, I'll go to you with this and switch up the order here. Was there any module or presenter that you guys found, most useful? I know that you mentioned before sort of getting the finance information, but maybe you could tell us a bit more about that, exactly what you found useful in that module.
Well, I think hearing from Angelis, who's with us on this panel, about how he kind of spurred and motivated the Fairfield community, and how he got to write the RFP, and how he brought an electric school bus to town. I think that was an act of genius, actually. And
why do you say that was an act of genius? I'm curious about that.
Well, because I think that people learn what they live, right? And so actually having everybody see the bus, and having adults and children walk on and off the bus, and just having it be there, it really becomes a reality for everybody. So I think that was really an act of genius. And so that was a wonderful module for me. But I have to repeat what Sonia said. I don't think that they were all really, really helpful. So I can't imagine missing any piece of it. I think that really every module kind of brought you a new piece of information, a new direction to kind of do your own work in, a new thought to have. So I really think that all the modules were really important.
That's good. And Sonia, I want to jump over to you, but first, I kind of want to hear from Angelis about the event that you hosted. Can you tell us a bit more about, how you supported this program?
I was actually going to ask you if I can jump in there. I would love to take the credit for that, but I did not do that. That was Daphne and her team who did it. And actually, as you said, having that bus in town was part of what sold me on getting me involved with this program, being able to actually get on that bus and walk the bus. I have 3 elementary age children who I brought to the event with me, who got on the bus, and the first thing they said when they got off the bus is, how come we can't have a bus like this? So it's just a cool looking bus for kids, and it just helps sell the whole program. So I have to give Daphne and her team the credit for arranging that and getting it in town. They not only brought the bus, but they had some different cars to show as well. It was a great event, and I would recommend anyone who could do it to reach out to Daphne and maybe put something like that together for their community.
Excellent. Yeah, that's good to hear. Like you said, I mean, the kids, when they see it, they're like, hey, this is nice, and it doesn't smell weird, and the diesel fumes and all that stuff. So
absolutely. It's a clean looking bus. It doesn't smell. The kids loved it.
That's great. That's good stuff. So yeah, Sonia, I would love to hear from you too. What modules or presenters really stood out to you, besides, sort of what you may have shared already?
So I agree with Sharon again that all of the modules were so valuable, but a couple stood out, and I think I agree with her again on those because those were things we really needed to learn about, which was the funding opportunities. There's a lot of concern in our town, like many towns, I'm sure, about not increasing costs if we're going to take on this project. And that's a concern on the part of the school administrators and the Board of Ed and the town citizens, the residents. So we really need to be able to sell this opportunity, understanding that there is a path and that there are funding opportunities. And I didn't have a lot of knowledge about the, deep knowledge into those funding opportunities. So that was incredibly helpful to hear from the representatives from Connecticut Deep. And definitely hearing from Angeles Papageorge in Fairfield. Weston has watched from the early days in July 2019 what path that Fairfield has taken, and it was so helpful to have him come and speak about the experience that Sharon already described. So that was also very valuable. I would add into that, the representative from Lion Bus Manufacturer, because that was my first interaction with the bus manufacturer. That was my, that was illuminating to find out that they provide opportunities and services to support towns in kind of navigating the process of procurement, understanding the partnerships that you have to bring together to discuss with utilities, with infrastructure experts, with bus manufacturers, with all these different entities to fully form kind of a vision for what your particular project or path is going to look like in your town, given your different circumstances. So that was illuminating for me. I will just second what Sharon said, that the Toolkit program really did a lot of the work for us, and therefore, it really reduced the amount of time and number of people involved in having to get to this point of understanding. So it was so invaluable. And I really appreciated also the additional weekly coaching calls that we had to kind of give us a chance to discuss things in more detail or to hear from other guests.
Great. That sounds wonderful. And so, you know what, I got my Q&A here is kind of blowing up. So I'm going to ask you guys some questions if that's all right. So first here, I got, so when Sharon, when you went to present at the school board, did you bring others to show, grassroots support? I know that you're leading this committee, but I think it seems like this person would like to hear more about what the balance was really in terms of, your need of grassroots support versus the air of legitimacy that the toolkit itself brings.
Well, because of the situation we find ourselves in, the presentation to the school board was via telephone conference.
That's harder.
And so it's awfully hard to bring bodies to a telephone conference. But again, as I had said before, because of the support of the first selectman, Jamie Cosgrove in Brantford, and because of the support that we had of our superintendent, Hamlet Hernandez, the only people who were on that conference with me was another board member, Bob Babcock, and he has had a very long and wonderful relationship with the Board of Education in Brantford. He started the Brantford Educational Foundation, and so I think his presence there was a real plus. And so it really was only about a 10-minute verbal presentation and then questions that they had. And that was the basis of the presentation.
Great. Thank you for that, Sharon.
Yeah. Could I add to that? I just wanted to mention that in Weston, we approached the Board of Ed, and for a variety of reasons, it was difficult to get on their agenda at that time. And so we took a different path, and we were very lucky in that very recently, Weston created a Sustainable Weston Schools Committee And sitting on that committee are the assistant superintendent of schools, a number of the principals or vice principals, some parents, some students, some administrators. And it was at that, because we had that group formed, I was able to go before that committee. I'm actually a member of the committee, but I was able to do a presentation also very similar to what Sharon described, about 10 minutes verbal, just talking about why electric school buses, what efforts are going on in the county. This was before the Toolkit emerged, but it gave us a starting point. It made them understand. We had a captive audience. It made them understand how serious the issue is and how important it is a part of all of our sustainability efforts in the schools. And so that gave us a little more traction and a launching point for a discussion. So that's how we got there.
Thank you for that, Sonia. Yeah. Wow, you guys have some great experience here. I wish you'd come over to Massachusetts and Rhode Island, you know, get more buses over there. But so far, I know Sharon and Sonia, you guys have been doing a lot of hard work to build up the momentum, you know, towards bus electrification. I have a question here. Have any of either of your towns purchased an electric school bus yet? And then the second part of the question I might be able to answer is, if so, is the cost of the vehicles and infrastructure available? I can tell you from my experience, these electric school buses upfront are between 300 and 350,000, I think. There's DERA grants, there's all sorts of stuff to help with that, the VW settlement money, and as well as utilities, you know, providing make-ready infrastructure. So don't let that scare you away, because the fuel and O&M costs help that TCO equal out for diesel. It depends on what your upfront funding is. It can, you know, be anywhere from 9 to 10 years if you have a decent DERA grant. So at least from the TCO calculation I did back in the fall. Anyway, but so no buses yet for Brantford or Weston?
No, not yet, but hopefully with the help of the chief operating officer, who has a relationship with our bus company, that hopefully that will be the next step.
Yeah, okay. And Sonia?
Same here. We, like a lot of towns in Connecticut, contract with the bus provider. And so we don't own our own buses, and it's going to take, you know, a dialogue or a partnership between a number of entities to procure the buses. Yeah, but we're working toward it.
It's a lot of work. Yeah. And Angelus, in Fairfield, have you guys procured a bus yet, electric school bus yet?
We have not. We're still working on funding to find out the best sources and which way we're going to go. Just like Sonia said, the town doesn't own the buses. We contract with the transportation provider. So it's been a long challenge, and getting the right people involved and having the conversations just to get to the point where we are actually trying to put numbers down and funding for not only the bus, but the infrastructure as well.
Got it. And Angelus, what was the type of school bus that was demoed on that day for the course? Was it a E-Line or Bluebird or Thomas Proterra?
I want to say Lions.
Okay, Lion Electric. Yeah, sounds good. Very cool. So let's see. I'm gonna keep trying to make my way through some of these Q&As. Yep, let's get to that.
And Tom, I think, sorry, just popping in, trying to help moderate some of these Q&As for
Thank
you.
Yeah.
I think there was a question about, with the toolkit, how big was the group, and did you feel like you had enough attention? There was a question about if it was a one-on-one or group for the toolkit. So if you can just speak to that a little bit.
So I would say that it was a pretty sizable group, which was encouraging and motivating. And you know, there were each module, there were additional guests who would show up, and it was great when somebody could bring in one of their actual school administrators or other decision makers from their town who showed interest. It gave us hope for our own. So I think there were 24 towns involved in this particular iteration. But it was, you know, I think it's probably growing, and I think that we were able to speak up. The moderators were very helpful in reaching out and making sure everyone had a chance to respond when there was an issue, making sure everyone had done the requirements for that particular week's module, or if they had questions. And then there were these weekly coaching calls that were made available to everyone. So that was really helpful if you needed to follow up. They made available to us a Facebook page or a Facebook group, and they made for us available, Google Docs where we could share documents as well. So it became, we didn't have to go through, them to communicate with each other, and we shared an email list as well.
Great. We had a comment come in, I think, Angelus, for the Fairfield school buses when the demo came. I think that was also part of the Sustainable Fairfield Task Force, besides Daphne's group as well. So they had worked to bring that to their event that they had. So just wanted to note and add on to what Angelus had said about that earlier.
Nice. Thank you, Andrea. All right. So I think I'm going to go back to my original questions here. And we have several good, Q&A questions lined up here, but there's one thing I would like to ask Sonia and Sharon, and then follow up with Angelus on after. And that is how, for me, I often can struggle, when starting a project and I need to, reach out to or perform the outreach and engage with stakeholders and decision makers. What would you say from the toolkit gave you maybe the most confidence or helped you the most in engaging, with these stakeholders? I mean, obviously it's sort of maybe the confidence of knowing that you can answer a lot of questions, but I'm curious to know what, your experiences have been. So Sharon, can you share with us what that's been for you?
I really think, as Sonia had said, having all the other towns who joined in the experience, because seeing that you just weren't the only one out there trying to get this done was very reassuring. And knowing that this was a movement that was happening in many other towns across the state, it really gave me the confidence to be able to go forward with a program like this and know that I wasn't just a solo operator somewhere.
Nice. How about you, Sonia?
So yeah, that's so true. And I would just add that at the request of some of the participants, Daphne and her team came up with some wonderful documents, some visuals that we could share with our decision makers, a frequently asked question page, sort of a page mapping out the path to electric school buses, a larger document with electric school bus basics, and another document I think that delineated the difference between diesel and electric school buses and propane buses. So it was those were really helpful documents that we could share with our decision makers and help answer some of their questions and move them forward.
That's great. Yeah, the more information that you can share that way, the better, for sure. Angelus, I'd like to ask you some questions here too, and then we can go back to Q&A. So I know, Angelus, you helped as kind of a guest with the Toolkit program, and I was wondering if you might be able to share your experience in this, and what you got out of it. Obviously, you enjoyed the school bus demo, but yeah, I'd like to hear about your experience.
I think the toolkit is a great asset for anyone who's even remotely thinking about possibly going down this line. It gives you a great background. It lets you find out what type of financing. I mean, as I explained at the toolkit, I've been in my position for just a year now, and I was just given transportation not that long ago. And to this day, when someone says what type of bus that is, there's A buses, I still don't know. Buses. Yeah. I have a supervisor who knows the buses in and out and everything else. I mean, we talk about 40 passengers, 60 passengers, small bus. I don't know anything about buses. So, but to sit at the toolkit and listen to what everyone with the knowledge of the buses and the infrastructures available, the costs, the programs that are available for costing, it was just a great opportunity. And when I was a guest at the toolkit meeting, one of the things I spoke about is the challenges, and there are a lot of challenges out there. People do not like change. The bus goes down the road, why change it? So it's just every step of the way in Fairfield, I've learned that every step of the way there's been a challenge, whether it's figuring out the right spec for the bus. Depending on your town, our town runs a 3-tier bus, so each bus runs 3 routes. So just that type of stuff. So what's the right spec for it? And just to get that information from people who are running at the bus company, it's just a challenge. Like I said, there's every step of the way. So building the right team, and I think the toolkit stressed that the most, was to build the right team of people to get on board with it and help go before the town bodies, go before the Board of Education, go before the people in the town. Because yes, we have a ton of students. So we have 10,000 students in town, but there's the residents in this town that don't have students. They need to buy in as well. Otherwise, you're fighting a small group, fighting an entire town to see the change. So it's just getting the right people involved and having the right team behind you is, I think, invaluable.
Thanks for that, Angelos. And actually, that makes me think of Sonia and Sharon, your school districts as well. How big are your school districts? Angelos, you mentioned 10,000 students in yours.
I have to admit, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Is it more of a rural or urban school district where you are, or suburban?
It's a small town.
Okay, gotcha. And Sonia?
And we're suburban. We have 2-acre zoning, and we have we're a small suburban town of 10,000 residents. So we have 1 high school, and 1 middle school, and 2 lower elementary schools. So it's not large, but it contrasts with Fairfield in that sense. But we can apply, this toolkit, we can apply this path, we can apply to our situation regardless of sort of size or other characteristics. We just have to, modify them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what, would you say, and I want to eventually here, maybe the last 5 minutes, get to sort of how you, what your next steps are, and especially with COVID, and how you plan to take things on. I know, we have issues in our jurisdictions where school districts are, maybe withholding payment to school bus companies if they contract with them versus owning their own school bus, and just because they can't pay it or whatever the case is, there's a lot going on. So there's a lot of sensitivities, that are, you have to consider when proposing this now or talking to school districts now. But before we get there, outside of COVID, and I want to go through all 3 of you, what would you say has been the biggest challenge so far for each of you in trying to convince your, thank you, Andrea, in trying to convince your school districts to electrify? Yeah, go ahead, Sonia. Yeah, sorry.
So I think, getting the ear of the decision makers, we've gotten to that point. We had a lot of momentum going in March, and a lot of interest on the part of certain select persons, allies in government, allies in the schools, the Sustainable West End Schools Committee, and parents. But, COVID really, put us on pause. And I'm very grateful, in fact, to Daphne and her excellent team for seeing this conference through and giving everyone a chance to participate virtually, which actually expands the outreach, and the beneficiaries for this toolkit and this conference. But I think, the plan for Weston is to allow the administrators to see through the end of this very difficult school year under these circumstances. We end on June 12th, and to re-engage with them at that point and talk about, resume discussions with them about how we can proceed with electrification of our school transportation. I'm fully committed to working with all the stakeholders to find the path that best fits our town. And I want to stay engaged with all the other Connecticut participants in the toolkit so that we can see if there are ways that we can collaborate, whether it's on regional grants or other projects, or just share information. So I feel like, we're at a launching point, and it's just a matter of getting through the end of this year and we're having serious discussions, and then pulling in the different partners to figure out what our path would look like.
Great. Thank you, Sonia. Go ahead, Sharon.
I think that it's true that the COVID epidemic has just been horrific in everybody's life. But as Daphne always says, it's really important to have all your ducks in a row. So I think if we can just make sure that we have all of the paperwork and information and grant applications done so that when and if things get back to some sort of normal, that we can just go right ahead and pursue the goal of getting an electric bus.
Mm. And so Sharon too, what would you say, in addition to sort of having everything, all of your preparation done ahead of time and being ready, with whatever information you need to give, what would you say has been the biggest obstacle in, developing that and bringing all that together and being prepared for these school districts? Because sometimes, stuff comes up, and for me, it's just amazing the amount that you need to do to be prepared, I guess.
I think trying to get the ear of the Board of Education.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think that was one of our biggest obstacles. But again, as I said, with the support of the First Selectman and with ultimately the support of the superintendent and with the amount of information that we were able to obtain and put in an organized fashion, I think that we were able to overcome that.
You guys are doing great work. This is so good. Because you're right. It is so hard just to get the ear of people, to, as Angelus, as you're saying, folks don't want to do anything different. And if it costs more and it's different, what, so Angelus, I want to hear from you too. What's been, the biggest obstacle for you, in this process of trying to electrify Fairfield?
So our biggest obstacle was, like I said originally, change. People don't want to hear it. They don't want to see it. If it's working, if it's not broken, why fix it? So, but to make people realize that it is a broken system and it does need to be fixed and updated. Times are changing. COVID has been a big supporter and helper of that, believe it or not. Like your last presenter had said, just all the new technologies that are available and opening people's eyes that we can do what we need to do. We can teach kids from home. We can make all this happen. So why are we still using an antiquated diesel system to transport these kids to and from a school? So just opening the eyes of changing that concept of don't fix what's broken to realizing that it is a broken system. It's an outdated, broken system that needs to be improved upon. So that was a big thing. Another one of our biggest hurdles, other than that, with this COVID, was we stopped having town meetings for a while, which postponed. When we started working on this, our bus contract was actually out to bid, and it came back, but it took us quite a bit of time to actually award the bid to the company, which postponed us being able to work directly with the company to get the funding, to line up the grants. So it was definitely a hurdle that we've climbed over, and we are starting to slowly get back into finding out where the funding is, what we can do, working with our utility companies to see what's available and move forwards at this point.
That's great. I really like how you framed that. And it's, it sounds harsh, but it's true in terms of saying it's, this is broken. We need to fix it. And this is the way to do it. So that's great. I know we only have a few minutes here.
Yep. Can I just add to that? I just
wanted to
say that, one thing I encountered, at least initially, and then at different intervals, was that it's not, we'd like to talk about this, but it's not a good time. And what I hear, what I feel as a parent and as a resident observing, our air quality issues in Connecticut, and even more so now with COVID, the studies have come out, showing the relationship between air pollution and COVID mortality. And it's really, the time is now, to echo what Bill McKibben said. And I don't understand why we need to wait to do this later. There's not going to be a good time because everyone's, everyone's agendas, their desks are full of work, especially now, but there's no better time than now. It's an urgent problem. Climate change isn't pausing for us, and it's time to take action.
Yeah, the electric school buses are knocking on the doorstep. I agree with you. This is the right time. And, you know, when someone is dismissive, frankly, when they say something like that, yeah, you have to push back. So that's good to hear. So, all right, I think, you know, we've kind of combined the obstacles and, you know, the challenges with COVID. I do have one last question, because this is something that, and this is kind of just a small detail type question, but I think it's important, just to give some context for all three of you. Do you guys own your own school buses in your school district, or do you contract out with a school bus owner and operator? I'll just go through all three of you.
So Weston contracts with the provider, yeah. And
Okay.
I'm sure that will continue.
And Sharon?
And so does Branford.
Okay. And Angelus?
Yes, we contract as well.
Okay, yeah, it seems like it's moved in that general direction, and I do think it's helpful, because I do think there can be a bit of a difference, but at the end of the day, the school, you know, has a lot of influence on those contractors to sort of push them to say, we, you know, want this and we will pay for it, and you know, don't be scared of it, to get them to jump in. So, all right, does anyone have any closing comments that they'd like to share before we wrap this session up?
Can I just say, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Angelus.
I just wanted to say that it's very frustrating, but don't give up. It's been a long road. There's a lot of hurdles in it, and you can overcome them. And Daphne and her toolkits are incredible and a great resource. So I would say just don't give up and use your resources the best you can.
Great.
Thank you, Angelus.
I just want to thank everyone, thank Tom and Mark, and thank Daphne and her excellent team. It's been wonderful to talk to Sharon and Angelus on this panel, and it's so exciting to be a part of this movement, and we hope it just grows and grows.
I guess I have to agree with what everybody said. I really think that the toolkit as it stands really can motivate a lot of people out there. So don't be afraid to take it on. It really has all the information that you need, and it really is important. And as Sonia says, there's no better time to do it than now.
Great stuff. You guys are inspiring. I love it. All right.
Great, thank you.
All right. All right. Well, what an amazing morning we've had so far. I think hearing the wisdom from Bill McKibben starting off this morning was incredible. I think something we all really appreciated. Tom, what a wonderful job you did as moderator of our Electric School Bus Toolkit panel. You did a tremendous job answering, getting the questions out of chat and asking the questions to our panelists, and giving your own feedback about what's going on in your state. And Sonia and Sharon, I just have so much appreciation for the great work that you're doing and the progress that you're making. I have so much respect for both of you, and it's incredible what you're doing. And Angelus, you just demonstrate such leadership in the town of Fairfield and moving forward with your the journey of getting electric buses procured for Fairfield. So I want to thank you all. It was an incredible panel, and I'm so honored that you shared your thoughts with us today. I do want to let everybody know, if you got on a little late, we are recording this, and so we will send the link out to you, so you'll be able to review it if you want to watch it again, or if you just want to watch it for the first time. We will send that link out to you, so you will be able to see it. We are going to take a 5-minute break. Get up, get some water, stretch your legs, and we will see you in 5 minutes. All right, we are back. My name is Daphne Dixon. I'm Executive Director of Live Green, and we are at the National Conference of Sustainable Development Electric School Bus Toolkit. I'm going to turn the mic now over to Abby Winter of Live Green.
Hi, everyone. So welcome back. And now we have our panel legislative action that support electric school bus deployment, moderated by Matt Masunis from the Connecticut Green Bank. Matt is a policy and outreach specialist for the Connecticut Green Bank, a quasi-public state agency that accelerates green energy adoption by making financing accessible and affordable. Matt serves as a liaison to legislative and regulatory bodies and also leads the agency's development in the transportation sector with a focus on electric vehicles and infrastructure. So thank you very much, Matt.
Took a triple authentication right there to unmute me. I want to start by reiterating something that I once said to Daphne, and that's about striking while the iron's hot. If we still had blacksmiths around, then I think they would tell us that that's backward. You make things hot by striking. And that's exactly what this reminds me of right here. So kudos to Live Green for your organizing work and the momentum that you're generating. We have with us today for our second panel, the most distinguished statesman and stateswoman that I've ever interviewed from a child's bedroom. We welcome Delegate Kay Corey from Virginia and Senator Patrick Dignan Jr. from New Jersey. We'll bring them into the conversation in just a few minutes once I help set the table. Feel free to go off mute and weigh in with a hello right now just to make sure that we're good.
Hello, you pronounce my name right, so you get a star right there.
Matt, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Yay, it works. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm delighted to be here. I'm learning a lot already.
Well, thank you both for joining us. If audience members have questions during the course of this panel, again, there should be a questions box available. Feel free to submit them for us. We'll try to work them into this segment as time allows with the help of the organizers. So just setting the table briefly. Nationally, there's been proposals legislatively around electric school buses. In July of last year, a group of U.S. congresspersons introduced the U.S. Clean School Bus Act. That would have authorized $1 billion over 5 years from the Department of Energy to fund a grant program for grants of up to $2 million to replace diesel school buses with electrics and invest in charging infrastructure, support workforce development, prioritize lower income students, and replace the most polluting buses. Some candidates for president have integrated that issue into their platforms as well. So, this technology hits the market and there's growing momentum around its deployment. A couple of the states that aren't represented here, I just want to call them out really quickly. Nevada passed a law last year allowing for a program for school districts to receive 75% of the cost of a new electric bus or 75% of the cost of infrastructure. It provides that a public utility in its annual plan that involves promoting or incentivizing electric vehicle infrastructure may incorporate that sort of grant program. So it's permissive to utilities. That's a common thread here, so watch out for that with regard to utility involvement in this. As my Zoom client is restarting, you're probably still hearing me. So it's good that I've got the redundancy of calling on from telephone here. So I'm sure my video will be shortly back. In Maryland, it requires the bill that they passed and the governor signs, their energy and transportation departments to jointly provide technical assistance to school systems, funded to the tune of about $600,000. And it also establishes a zero-emission vehicle school bus transition grant program that provides grants to county boards of education for the acquisition of vehicles and charging infrastructure. I looked at the fiscal note on that, and I didn't see one for the grant program, so that tells me maybe it's involved with the VW mitigation settlement monies in that instance. So anyway, just covering those two states and setting them aside for the moment, we've got firsthand experience from an additional 2 states as far as the legislative process. On to our legislators, starting with Delegate Kay Corey, who was a champion for electric school buses in Virginia's House of Delegates. Virginia is a fascinating case study. That's where the utility Dominion has begun an electric school bus pilot. It really caught the nation's attention. I know they've got a lot of queries about that from around the country, and they sought legislative approval subsequently to enact a phase 2 of that program. Delegate Corey, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. You gave me a list of questions. Would you like me to jump in? You want to start with the questions that you gave to me first?
I'll cue it up, unless
Okay.
you'd just like to say.
Oh, well, I would like to say something. I would like to thank Bill McKibben for all the work that he's done and for his blessings on this particular issue and project. And I'd also like to thank Daphne Dixon for inviting me and putting all this together. I think this is a great opportunity for us to push public opinion, to push legislators to have electric school buses immediately available to school systems who are replacing their bus fleets. And I know there's a lot of differences state to state, the way the legislatures work, who owns what, who's in charge of school systems, who isn't. And so some of those issues are going to come to the fore and make our Virginia's process a little different. And I can introduce some of those if you want, but I think you were interested in more exciting information. Isn't that right?
Always. Well, just, starting out with, I guess, what attracted you to this issue? It seems like electric school buses just win all day, right? They've got all sorts of co-benefits.
Right.
A lot of different constituencies can get behind that. Why did you want to be a champion? Because as we know, on the legislative side, it really requires at least one champion to get the ball rolling, right?
Yes.
And to Sherpa something in the process.
I was on the school board for 10 years before I became in Fairfax County, before I became the delegate. And actually the budget in Fairfax County is in the billions, and the students are 180,000 students, and we have 1,600 buses. So it's a very large enterprise for a school board to manage. I learned a lot as a facilities chair. Anyway, that sort of queued up my interest, and I began to look at school buildings that were environmentally friendly and environmental learning opportunities. And anyway, so that's something that I've always been interested in. And when I read about Moms Out Front, what they were doing out west and working with the utilities to get grants and opportunities for electric school buses, because I've been in the legislature a long time, I just called up Dominion and said, hey, why aren't you guys doing this? We need this. You need to look good. So why don't you do this? And they said, oh, secret surprise. We're working on it, and we were going to announce it next month. So this was what, a dual initiative? But you asked me also about, and if I talk too much, stop me. You asked me sort of like what made the time right. And Virginia has been gradually turning blue over the past 4 years. And more energy concerns are coming to the fore. And more people are being activated to have their voices heard once they understand all the problems and issues that we're having and how it all relates to the environmental issues that we're having. So I started an environmental advisory group. I have a constituency that is very well educated, fairly affluent, and entitled. So they always want to tell me what to do, and frequently they know what they're talking about. And I thought it would be a good idea to have a group of my constituents advising me in terms of what legislation they wanted this year, because I know what I believe generally that is important for the environment and Virginia as a whole, but I wanted to be sure that I was meeting the specific issues, that parts that they cared about. And in that, Mothers Out Front and Sierra Club and Clean Virginia were major players. Anyway, they all agreed to support this project, in which Dominion would do an initial outlay of 50 school buses across the state. School systems would have to apply. Most school systems in Virginia own their school buses some lease, but most do not. And they wanted legislative approval, and these environmental coalitions all agreed that they were going to support this project. And the reason that Dominion wanted a legislative approval is because in Virginia, the State Corporation Commission regulates utility costs and expenditures. I'm sorry, I'm trying to make this simple, but what they wanted was to be sure that the way they were going to allocate the costs for this program and be able to continually roll it out with more and more buses was approved by the Corporation Commission and the legislature. So I put in the legislation for the first 50 buses. And there's a story, but I can stop there. Anyway, okay, the bill seemed relatively, yeah, very briefly. The bill seemed very simple, like a lot of good ideas, but it apparently was not. And it ultimately didn't pass. There was a bill in the Senate as well, and melding those two was ultimately our downfall. In Virginia, the legislature is in session for 2 months and 3 months alternately a year, and that's it. And this year was the first time that the Democrats were in charge in 20-something years. And then we had to learn a lot, sorry, in a very quick time. And so many people, well, we had 5,000 bills to deal with in 80 days, which was a lot. And so since this seems like such a simple, easy project that all the Democrats agreed to, it didn't get a lot of attention while we were running around and ironing out bigger issues like minimum wage. And all of a sudden, towards the end of session, it became obvious that there was a serious divide between the House and the Senate. And that was what we were scrambling to work out at the very last minute. And it was really politics with a small p that got in our way. And we ultimately were not able to have each body accept the other's version. And in your questions, you talked about a competing piece of legislation. It wasn't competing, actually, we were complementary. Another delegate had proposed a project similar to the way California handles it, which is they use the VW settlement money, and they give grants to school systems for electric school buses. This was an unfunded idea that ultimately he postponed till years to come and wanted to push the much more limited project that we were working on. So all eyes are turning to 2021. Oh, and Dominion agreed because they had already promised school systems 50 buses. It was 16 school systems across the state. They agreed that they would do the first 50 and pay for it all themselves. And those are due to come out in December.
And because they're paying for that themselves, it doesn't get covered in the rate base of the utility with their electric ratepayers. They're just paying out of pocket as a pilot, I believe.
Well,
that's why they were able to go ahead.
Yeah, I believe that's the case. However, they will have to get specific approval for the way they're allocating it from the State Corporation Commission. But they had made this commitment, and honestly, they are a profit-making monopoly, and they want to build a future and a future customer base for themselves in the electric school bus electric vehicle market. So in giving these school buses to school systems and building all the infrastructure, you know, they are helping themselves, as well as it's a backup for the grid, the batteries in the school buses. Anyway, I've been talking too long, sorry.
No, you hit a lot of great issues. I think from the end there, I mean, you've got the utilities incentive for wanting to be a part of this. We've seen those sorts of dynamics, what with build out a charging infrastructure. Right. States like California, between private providers and utilities. Yes. You hit on the idea that I think a lot of folks, I tend to hear it from legislators up here, is that there's a common conception that the other party is the enemy, but really toward the end of a legislative session, the other legislative chamber is almost the enemy in terms of agreeing.
I think it happens in DC also. Yeah. No matter who's in charge, but yes.
So.
But Matt, I didn't mention the health part. I just really want to emphasize that in going through all of this study by University of Georgia State, where they correlated riding in a diesel school bus with lower academic scores than the kids who ride in an electric school bus. And they documented it over a period of almost 10 years. So it's a fascinating study, and you can't refute the results that math scores moved a little, but English scores had a huge difference between electric and diesel. And we have an awful lot of non-native English speakers in Virginia and across the country. And so that particular ability, I feel really bad. I'm taking time away from New Jersey. Sorry.
Yeah, you know, as a panelist, your whole role is to talk. I really appreciate it, and we're continuing to appreciate hearing from you. You've got, so I've got some really nerdy technical questions queued up that I'm actually going to defer for the moment. Maybe our listeners will appreciate that I'm skipping over those for the moment so that we can get to New Jersey. But one of the most interesting items that you had mentioned there from Virginia, it strikes me as a really short legislative timeline right there.
Yes.
And so there is a real crunch when it comes to managing the clock. And
yes.
The additional circumstance that originally I was going to ask into, you know, to what extent you need to reach across the aisle to have legislative leaders from both parties be signed off on something. And those are really unique dynamics. Forgetting on my part that in Virginia, it was the first time in 20 years that you had that Democratic governor and majority coming in. So that, you know, it really sets its own tone when it comes to the circumstances there.
Let me add a detail to that. Just that we have a process where halfway through the session, you can't send bills to the other body. So effectively, midway in around Valentine's Day, no more new bills, no more negotiating. Whatever's passed one house goes to the other. So it's an even shorter time frame, which makes for frayed tempers and less sleep.
Interesting. In Connecticut, we have the ability to bypass that cutoff, but really only with a gentleman's agreement with leadership and, you know, emergency certifying something past the normal legislative rules. But it's really just for, you know, not traditional legislation.
You're right.
At this stage, I want to give a fair turn to New Jersey. So we'll turn to Patrick Degnan, Jr., the chairman of New Jersey Legislature's Transportation Committee, as well as a member of the Senate Budget Committee and the Select Committee on New Jersey Transit. Senator Degnan, welcome to you.
How you doing? Let me first apologize. My neighbor is having their patio replaced, so that, can you hear the drilling in the background? You can't make it up.
Not at all.
With Zoom meetings. Anyhow, New Jersey has different challenges than Virginia or Connecticut, as I'm now hearing. We have a very progressive governor, Phil Murphy, who embraces clean energy and is really supportive of all of these initiatives. And we have a very progressive Republican side of the aisle. In fact, the one bill that passed the Senate concerning the demonstration project passed 38-1. There was only one Republican.
Wow.
In our particular case, it's more practical. First of all, as you know, we're the most densely populated state in the nation. Over 9 million people in the smallest state. So really, basically, the charging stations, the infrastructure, the actual execution of the implementation is our challenge rather than a challenge of pushback. Also, our boards of education in New Jersey are 90% funded by property taxes, which makes the local districts much more involved with expenses, again, even though they support it. And then also we have another factor that over half of the school buses operated in New Jersey are by private carriers, not owned by the school districts, contract with the carriers. So in our particular case, it's more pragmatic as opposed to political, thank God. Listening to the Virginia situation, thank God I'm born in New Jersey. So it's really, in New Jersey, it's really just an implementation issue. And now with this craziness with the pandemic, the state budget is in chaos. Normally I'm on the budget committee. We usually adopt by June 30th, and we usually do it early again because we have a pretty good consensus. This year we've pushed it back to October. So it's just, it's just challenging times. And sadly, I believe so many good priorities such as this can be lost in the shuffle. So anybody listening on this call or on Facebook, the environmental community in particular, now more than ever, it's very, very important that these issues remain on the forefront and remain on the radar screen.
Thank you for that. I'd like to dig in on a couple of the proposals that you were sponsoring in the past year or so, because they're really intriguing. Coming from Connecticut Green Bank, we're essentially economic development, the financing agency. And so you had one down there that would have created a loan program within a development authority for school districts and bus contractors to finance the incremental costs above a normal bus that would accompany electric buses and charging infrastructure. So I guess my question is, was that a predictive move with the anticipation that that would be demanded from the market? Or did you see districts and providers already kind of signaling their demand out to you that they wanted to integrate some sort of a financing program into their acquisition of buses rather than paying upfront capital costs?
I mean, again, the private carriers repeatedly, when I meet with them, say, they're not against electric buses, it's just a difference in cost. So it was really basically one major issue aside. As I said, there really isn't the pushback. The only real pushback in New Jersey right now is the charging stations. Will it be done by a competition, or will we use an existing utility such as public service to actually install all the charging stations? I can debate it either way. I think at this particular time, the legislature is leaning towards having an existing utility do it only because it will expedite it. See, again, the dynamic is so different in Jersey than Virginia. There is, as I said, 38-1 in the Senate. There is almost universal support. It's just the implementation and the financing issue here.
Right. Oh, I need to interrupt for a second. I think I gave Dominion much better press than they deserve, in the sense that they're not paying for the whole electric school bus. They're paying for the differential, and they're paying for the charging stations. And yes, it can be $100,000 difference between the new diesel buses and the new electric buses. But so this is fitting in more with when school systems are replenishing their fleet on a rotating basis, and they are paying the basic cost, and then Dominion is filling in.
And, and also, and again, it's not that anybody's opposed to it, but there are constantly, whenever we have discussions in committee, there are constantly questions about the durability of electric buses, the cost if a battery goes, what happens when the air conditioning is on. And obviously members from the industry come in and explain it, but that's why I like the two bills that I have. Let's really put it into place so this doesn't become a hypothetical, it becomes a real experience that we can refer to.
Some slight bit of inside baseball here. Do you feel that those legislative discussions where you're negotiating this out, discussing it out with fellow committee persons, are you to the same extent as regulatory bodies that oversee utilities, that they're so right in the middle of this? They're all looking at cost-benefit analysis. We know what the benefits are on the one side of the ledger when it comes to public health, et cetera, electric distribution system benefits. Do those conversations happen with the same frequency in the legislative realm, or is it more or less influenced by the constellation of advocates, as that might be more intense on the legislative side than it is on the regulatory side? I'm just wondering if you have any perspectives on that sort of angle, because it does seem like there's a couple different approaches depending on how the state's reins are on its utilities and whether or not they're already permissive to do something versus, for example, legislature proposing to directly fund something on budget versus going through the electric bill and therefore kind of setting up a separate regime on top of that. I'm just wondering if you want to take that. Do you want to take that?
Yeah, no, I'm delighted because it's an important difference. My bill, where Dominion pays the difference in bus purchasing costs and also installs all the infrastructure, allowed the opportunity to put that cost in the ratepayers base. And so in the legislature, there's a big discussion about how much ratepayers are going to pay, if they get a refund, if it doesn't cost as much, those sorts of issues. It's more constituent oriented, more consumer oriented. However, we can tell the state corporation what to do, Corporation Commission. We usually don't. They are separately chartered in the Constitution. So they're there forever. And there are judges who run them, and we elect the judges, but they tend to reflect past political leanings of general assemblies because they're in office for 6 years. And their charter is to have the cheapest rate possible. So in general, in my opinion, they're very short term. For example, we had to legislate that they would start an underground wiring program in the state no matter what. We spent years trying to get them to agree to it as an investment in the future, but it raised rates. So finally, the legislature just mandated it and they started doing it. So that's, hopefully that answers you. It's not pleasant when we do that because it's not really our business. But this time, shockingly enough, the State Corporation Commission thought it was a great idea and they were very, very happy to work with it. And so Dominion would have had to go through a public hearing with them if my bill had passed. It wasn't a sure thing.
Well, it does answer my question since it was probably 5 questions at once, so it hit something there. I want to give Senator Duignan the opportunity as well, and then check with our moderator to see if we have any audience questions at the moment.
I'm all ears.
Okay, so over to our moderator, Andrea. Is there any extent to which you want to jump in with questions that you might be able to see on your side?
Sure. So I think Kay might have mentioned this, but just to get it out there, you said I think 50 buses had been verified as coming in.
Yes, they will be delivered in December, and it's already through the application process been determined which school systems they will go to. Dominion tried very hard, and I think they did a good job to spread them around the state and also to different populations, where my part of the state is very more urban than rural. However, our school system has a rural arm. So the buses in Fairfax County have short trips and a few occasional long trips. They were looking for some more rural as well, so they could measure how it works on long trips, both the health effects and the environmental effects. So yes, in December, we'll do some ribbon cutting.
Sounds great. And for Senator Duignan, is there a timeline at all that you're looking at, or what are your thoughts on that?
Full disclosure, what's happened with the pandemic, anyone that would tell you that there's a timeline on anything at this point, we just really have to get the lay of the land. Right, we have to get our state and back in business and support our families that are so challenged at this particular time. So that's #1 priority. But and I just have to reinforce, as opposed to the Virginia experience, in New Jersey, there's overall consensus on both sides of the aisle, and we have an extremely progressive governor, that this is something we want to do. It's just implementing it.
Right. Well, for us, fortunately, I checked just before this call, and the contract for the 50 buses is not facing any obstacles. And so we should have the first 50. And then hopefully this economic crisis will have settled down and we'll know how long it'll take to plan for the next phase, because we're all talking about another phase with more buses.
Wonderful, yeah.
Can I ask a question, because I'm a little confused. So what is it, that one statewide transportation agency deals with all the school buses in Virginia?
No, the school buses are owned and or contracted by, there are some that are leased, are owned by the school systems that are run by elected school boards who are independent.
And you have large school districts, right? In New Jersey, we have one in every town.
Yeah, actually, secretly, I used to live in New Jersey, so I know what you're talking about.
Secretly?
But yeah. Okay, I used to live in New Jersey, but then you're going to ask me why am I in Virginia? Never mind. But yeah, it is very different, and I know that the breakdown of local government in the Northeast is totally different. The county overlaying and yeah,
we have over 500 school districts. It's just so much complicates.
Exactly. Exactly. In theory, the state can't tell the school board what to do. So we have to work with the school board in general on these issues, but most school boards thought this was a super idea. They didn't want to fill out the 50 million page application, but they really liked the idea of getting some financial help into a more green school bus universe. So yeah, we don't have that many local, and besides that, guess what? Now I'm the chair of the local government committee. So we're going to do this next year.
Great, and I'm going to step in here and say that we have a 10-minute warning, so we'll be wrapping this panel up in 10 minutes. But the next question that I have is, and I know this will vary state to state, but do you think that do you think it would be easier for either school boards or bus contractors to go through VW grant money, or do you think it would take going through the state legislatures to get funding for electric buses?
Well, for us, I'm sorry, the governor is basically in charge of the VW fund that we have here. And I know California used their VW settlement money, and that would have been nice, even though it's one-time money. It'll eventually go away, which was one reason why some of us were talking about creating a loan fund. But you'd have to go through the legislature and the governor to use that money. And the governor has actually agreed to use some of it this way, but it would be separate from the project I'm working on now, hopefully supplemental, because there's nothing in writing right now.
And Senator Daigan in New Jersey?
I know that the VW money is already being allocated in certain ways, but the main funding source would have to be through the legislature. And again, the good news is there's not the pushback. It's just, as Bill Clinton said, when all is said and done, it has to do with arithmetic. Whereas, we have to have the funds to offset the cost.
Right. I agree. Yeah, I'm just hoping oh, go ahead. No, I was just saying, I'm just hoping that we'll be able to handle utility rates in such a way that when this economic crisis is over, we'll be able to afford another phase of these electric buses. I have no idea how the market will be when we're done.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of unknowns right now. I was really curious, actually, to Senator Dykes briefly. We all, think about knocking out home runs when it comes to these legislative proposals, but there was one really incremental sounding one that I saw in New Jersey that allowed for the maximum width of a bus to be expanded a certain number of inches if it was an electric bus. So was that seen as like a way station on the way to as a necessary step for further deployment? Are there technical aspects that have to be resolved in advance and chiseled away at before you get to those big deployments that would better facilitate for that technology to be hitting the market in a state?
Absolutely. That was to have that in place. As I was saying, in New Jersey, the issues are more practical. So to have that in place, so that was not a stumbling block down the road. So it's just really basically an implementation issue.
May I ask the senator a question, please?
Of course.
Are you thinking at all, and I'm asking this because it's something I would like to do, of having Wi-Fi in your school buses as a supplement to broadband, lack of broadband for, especially these days, it's high on people's list. But that's something I'm trying to do here, to get the Wi-Fi in school buses. And I've been secretly beating on Dominion to pay for that. I've not succeeded yet, but is that an issue that is coming up for you?
No, it isn't, but I'll look into it. Thanks,
Okay.
thanks for raising.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for listening to me.
Well, hey, look, you spend time in New Jersey, you got to be okay.
Yeah, you miss me, right?
So we had another question come in for New Jersey, and they were asking if there's any money available for electric school buses through the RGGI program, which is the Regional
Right.
Greenhouse Gas Initiative.
Right.
If there is, I'm not familiar with it. I didn't mute myself. Yeah, if there is, I'm not familiar. It has not come up in our discussions.
Okay. And we have a question here about, let's see, for Virginia, they're asking, you had mentioned that the governor is in charge of the VW funding, but do you know when that would be available, or has there been any timeline put out?
I'm not aware of a timeline. I know the governor has allocated some of the funds already. By that, I don't know if they've been actually distributed. I know he has said over the past year he would put some money to different projects. So my assumption is, because he has been supportive of the electric school bus issue, that he would be willing to take some money out of the VW fund to put into this initiative, but we don't have details and we haven't had that conversation yet.
And we have another question here about, as you work to electrify school buses in your state, has there been any work done to electrify transit buses?
Is that for both states?
For either state,
Oh.
yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'll get Corey.
Actually, in New
Senator
Jersey,
No, go ahead.
yeah, NJ Transit is dedicated, and some of the VW money also is for transit. So yes, in New Jersey, it's both.
Right, right. It's a totally separate thing in Virginia. There are some localities that are having intra-metro area buses begin to be electrified and or talking about doing that. I frankly would like to see a statewide initiative with all the state-owned vehicles and the municipal vehicles owned by the counties to become part of this new electric fleet. So if anybody's listening,
And then
let's do this.
in Connecticut, our DOT has begun piloting electric buses, and they've had initial procurements right there. Most, they pay for themselves really easily, and most of that is funded through the federal government anyway. So their concerns, as I've heard them, tends to be when it comes to putting these out on the road, what is the electric rate design that they're under, because that equates to their cost of fuel. And then really, you know what, I'm blanking on the other thing. So I'm not a DOT worker, but we've had those medium to heavy duty infrastructure conversations up here. And that actually is what it regards is how do you fund the charging infrastructure, and where's the missing money for that? Because a fleet deployed at scale is a multi-megawatt substation. And so where does that come from if you're converting transit over to electrification on the heavy duty side? So it is a low hanging fruit when it comes to state.
Yeah. For Virginia, it would have to be multiple funding sources working together. It would have to be the State Department of Transportation handling the modes that they handle, and the localities with their own. We'd have to work together. The governor has said that he wants to have the cars that belong to the state as they're replenishing their fleet be electrified, but it's not clear. I think we're hoping that Dominion will put up all the infrastructure. So it's simply not clear. We'd have to have a number of groups agree, and I bet that's the same in New Jersey. Is it?
Yeah, it's numerous entities that are involved in the process.
Yeah.
So we have a question coming in about kind of looking at the manufacturing of the buses. If you have electric buses coming to your state, would you be looking at bringing bus manufacturers as well to the state? Has that come up in any kind of conversations? And Senator Daigen?
No, I have not heard any conversations in New Jersey concerning.
Well, actually, it has come up in my conversations with Dominion. They are interested in attracting the manufacturing to Virginia. There are some talks going on. Who knows what's happened since we're in this health and economic crisis. But there was a contract signed where a company that makes the batteries that the school buses would use to begin to manufacture in Virginia. I think they're located in California now. And of course, that would be the primary, we would hope, the primary source for all the thousands of electric school buses we're going to have in Virginia. But again, I do not know how our current situation has affected that. But we were working it all together.
It's a great question. There's a real economic development story potential there.
Yeah.
So it looks like we're about out of time for this panel, but I want to thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Matt, for moderating. Beautiful job. And thank you to Delegate Corey for joining us and Senator Daigen from New Jersey for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Senator,
you.
let's stay in touch, Senator. Huh?
Yes,
yeah.
Okay. Be good.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I'm Kelsey McCormick. I'm the program director here at Live Green. And I just want to say thank you again to Matt for moderating and so much to our legislators for joining us for our last panel. So I'm here to introduce our next panel, which is on national success stories, and it will be moderated by Richard Lee from Lion Electric Company. Richard Lee holds a position of Director of Eastern U.S. Sales at Lion Electric Company with a strategic focus towards school districts that are considering EV technology in their school bus fleets, along with creating a commercial and school dealer network to assist in the future growth of school and commercial opportunities. Rick has been involved in the commercial and school bus industry for over 30 years, including small shuttle bus, small and mid-sized low floor, school bus, and hybrid vehicle markets. Rick has held various positions during his careers, ranging from engineering, manufacturing, sales, and business dealer development. Rick is a self-driven director that strives to put the customer first with sales and support objectives. Rick has been such a great help and such a great resource for us throughout our electric school bus toolkit program, and we're really excited to welcome him to moderate our panel today. Thank you, Rick.
Well, thank you very much, Kelsey, for having me on board today. I look forward to moderating the panel discussion. The participants in our panel discussion today are regionally spread out throughout the United States. So everybody that is on board is going to give you a different perspective from different states. It's going to give you something special. I just want to make sure everybody is on board now. I see Dave. I see Sergio. I see Tim. And we're missing somebody. We're looking for Jennifer.
Jen.
Oh, there she is. Hi, Jen. Well, great. Well, this is some great stuff going on today. The previous sessions have been very informative. And Daphne and your team, thanks for everything. This has been a great day, and I hope I can fulfill the previous sessions with that much information. I'd like to introduce to you the panel discussion today. Our first member is Jennifer Wallace-Berdier. Jennifer is the Director of Transportation Efficiency for Vermont Energy Corporation. A lot of us know it as VEIC. Our second member is Tim Shannon of Twin Rivers Unified School District, which is located in McClellan Park, California. Tim is the Director of Transportation at the school district. Our third member, close to home, is Sergio Alfonso of White Plains Public Schools, which is also in White Plains, New York. Sergio is the transportation supervisor for their school district. And finalize the group, the great member of Zeeland, Michigan, my home state, Dave Mewson of Zeeland Public Schools. Dave is the transportation director for that school district also. So as you notice, we have various regions of the United States providing a very diverse group that will provide interesting substance to today's session. As the moderator today, I'm going to be directing a couple of specific questions to each panelist. Why I'm doing it this way, because they all have a unique feature in the EV technology world. One question to all four would be kind of boring, so I've kind of customized the questions to each person. And to start today off, Jennifer is first at bat. She's going to set the bar high for the other three in terms of her response and dialogue. So we'll get this going. Jennifer, in the fall of 2016, VEIC managed an electric school bus deployment involving 3 separate school districts in Massachusetts. As a pilot program, did the vehicles provide value with regards to fuel savings and reduce operation maintenance costs? But more importantly, briefly explain to the attendees and to the members today how you selected those school districts to participate in your program.
Sure, thanks so much, Rick. I'm really happy to be here and joining everybody on this webinar. It's a great opportunity to connect with you and share our experience working in Massachusetts and Vermont and some states in the Mid-Atlantic as well. So before I answer your question, I'm just gonna give a little bit of background on who I am and what we do at VEIC. So as Rick said, VEIC we're a sustainable energy company, and we have a mission to enhance the environmental and economic and societal benefits of clean and efficient energy use for everybody. We're headquartered in Vermont, and I'm actually calling in from my home here in Burlington, Vermont, but we also have offices in Ohio, Washington, DC, New York, and Wisconsin. And I lead the Clean Transportation Group at VEIC, and we are almost exclusively focused on transportation electrification. So we work with programs to increase adoption of light-duty vehicles for personal use and in fleets. And we've done quite a bit of work with school bus electrification. We also do some transit electrification. But we were very fortunate to work with the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources on the project that Rick mentioned. That kicked off in 2016 and wrapped up at the end of 2018. And we worked with 3 school districts, Amherst, Concord, and Cambridge, to purchase and deploy and evaluate school buses in their ongoing daily school transportation service. And we learned a lot from that project. To start with your second half of your question, how did we pick the school districts? It was a competitive process. So we helped Massachusetts TOER put together an application. It was distributed to schools throughout the state, and school districts responded with their interest, and we selected the partners from there that we ultimately ended up working with. That's a similar process that we're using with the pilot program we're doing here in Vermont. It was a competitive process for school districts to apply to, and that has worked pretty well so far. So in terms of our findings, this was a great pilot because we learned a lot of things that I think school districts should really be aware of when they're deploying electric school buses. So we actually didn't realize the energy savings and the fuel savings that we were expecting, and which are a really important benefit of adopting electric school buses. And when we dug underneath that to find out like what was going on, we actually identified a couple of things that are important to be aware of and have strategies in place to resolve. So key things were the buses were drawing more energy than we inspected. And what we found out is if you leave the vehicles plugged in, say over the weekend, and the battery has been fully charged, you can still draw energy from, you can still be drawing electricity to support auxiliary systems like fans and cooling systems. So it's really important to have a program in place to make sure that you're not incurring or drawing more electricity than you need on a regular basis. The other thing we learned was that schools were incurring demand charges. So they were plugging in the vehicles at times that weren't advantageous to the grid. And so they were paying more for electricity than they needed to be. And again, that's a relatively easy fix to just schedule your charging at a time when you know that electricity prices are low. School buses can typically be plugged in overnight, much like a personal vehicle at home, and be sufficiently charged to operate during the day. And so I think what we learned is there's like, need to be aware that these things can happen, and you need to have a strategy in place. And there's certainly technology, and there's a lot of knowledge and information out there on how to avoid using more electricity than you need to and incurring demand charges. So long story short is when we did our analysis of the actual performance and then sort of looked at what those costs would have been if they'd had a managed charging program in place and they weren't plugging in and incurring demand charges, and they shut off the electricity when the battery is full, that they would have actually realized significant cost savings from operating those buses. So as I say, pilots are where you learn things. And hopefully everybody that's listening into this and everybody that we've shared this information with over time has learned that you need to be paying attention to these things and have a strategy in place to solve for them.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer, for your response. And to back up your last sentence, electric school buses are here. A lot of people say that it's a pilot program or a demo program. Pilot programs get the ball running, but at the end of the day, we can all admit school buses are going to be electric in the future, and let alone line electric, but other school bus manufacturers see it coming, and we're preparing ourselves for that movement. Our next panelist is way out in California. Early morning for Tim. Good morning for you, Tim.
Good morning.
Tim, when your district committed to electric school bus deployment, what factors played a role in your decision? And before you answer, I want everybody to know that Tim Shannon runs the biggest school bus electric fleet in the U.S. So he's like the gladiator in terms of electric school buses. So now we get to sit back and listen to Tim share to us why he chose electric over this specific fossil fuels.
Let me just give you a little bit about our district so you guys kind of know what we're all about and what our challenges are. We're in the greater Sacramento, California area. We are a 127 square mile district with 52 schools that we support. We are at 87.9% free and reduced lunch, but we provide meals for every student in the district. We also are a Title I district. So fortunately for us, we do have a little extra money that we could support the introduction of electric school buses. But what we did was we were running school buses that were 20, 30 years old, heavy diesel polluters, it was just pretty disgusting even walking in the yard. And I met this guy named John Clements. He's known as the electric school bus evangelist. And John showed me this opportunity, and we started working with California Air Resources Board, Sacramento AQMD, and we looked at it like, what we need to do is we can support their goals for clean air, but they can support us by loosening up the purse strings and providing some grant funding. So we created this program back in 2015, early 2016, to get funding for 27 school buses in the greater Sacramento area. Our district took the lead. I pushed this thing. We were able to get 16 of those 27 school buses. We were able to put that funded the full infrastructure, about almost $500,000, along with getting our utility to kick in another $92,000, just because we put some stickers on the bus. But our main goal in the beginning was that we could get 16 brand new school buses for $900,000. So that was our first motivation. The second motivation is that once we got the buses, we noticed that the air was a lot cleaner within our facility, and we started promoting clean air for kids and community. And that's our goal. We know that it's great for the environment, but that becomes a very political issue. But when you go to a legislator and ask them for more money, and you tell them this is for kids, for clean air and community, how can they say no? So that's how we got started in electric. So we in 2016, we were able to procure 16 electric school buses. And currently we have 30, and we have another 27 of them on the way that are fully funded. And we're increasing our infrastructure to 82 charging stations and bringing a megawatt of power in, and using, we're gonna do some V1, V2, V to G testing with SMUD in order to do load leveling, to keep us out of peak. We're working with a company to provide charge management. And we currently pay about 19 cents a kilowatt mile at the highest, and 15 at the lowest. But those are just a few little facts, but we are all about clean electric school buses here. And I will tell you, the community, the kids, the staff, everybody loves them.
That's great stuff, Tim. Tim, since you're actively on stage right now, I got a question from Barry Carr, and I think I'm going to expand the question a little bit further.
Sure.
Barry asked Tim, what vendor did you use for the school buses, and how difficult was it to convince and educate the school board? But also, I want to let everybody know that the vehicles in Massachusetts were Lion Electrics, and Tim is a little bit different. So Tim, go ahead and answer that question on the vendors of your school bus applications.
So when we first started, there was only one dealer in electric school buses, and that was First Priority. They're not around for us anymore, but there were two vendors for electric school buses. One was Lion Electric, which they're great, and the other was Motive. Lion had 1 million miles in Canada on their electric buses. Motive is the company that provides the electric buses in Mountain View, California, to pick up Google employees. So they were both proven that their vehicles did work. So we got 8 of each for the initial procurement, and we landed a CEC grant for $3.8 million, and those are all Lion buses. They're going to be 5 Type D and 5 Type Cs. And then we also purchased 5 Bluebird electric buses with some HFIB money and some local money that we stacked. So we paid about $60,000 a piece for those buses. So we do have quite a mix, and we plan on supporting all the vendors in the electric school bus arena, because we want this technology to grow as fast as possible. But I will say Lion is at this point the Cadillac of electric buses, and they actually opened up an experience center right in our district in Sacramento to support us.
Very good. Tim, how about the education of the school board? Was it a simple buy? Was it easy to convince your school board members that this is the way to go?
It was, because it was simple. One, I did get Senator Cerna to provide a letter to the school board, and we had a lot of buy-in from the Air District. But I think the biggest thing about it is that they saw that we could procure 16 brand new electric buses for less than $1 million. And then, it was all hypothetical how much we were going to save, but we save over 60% in maintenance cost on an electric bus because the fact that they're only have about 26 moving parts versus 2,000 in a combustible engine. And then on the other side, the fuel cost, 19 cents a mile versus 86 cents a mile in California, a big difference. So when we started pushing those numbers to them, it was a no-brainer.
That's great stuff. I'm happy you're sharing that with us. Jennifer, we have a question for you. Gene, I'm going to butcher his last name, but Jonas, he's asking, how did Jen's pilot handle winter heating during the winter months up in Massachusetts? Did the vehicles perform?
Yeah, we actually used auxiliary heaters, and I know that that's actually not. I don't think you can do that in California. Could be wrong, because of their regulations. But we used diesel-fired auxiliary heaters, which obviously helps preserve the battery, and you can maintain your range in the winter, but there's trade-offs in terms of exposure to exhaust. So it's something that I'm hoping that the industry is paying attention to, because I think we need better solutions for folks that actually do need to use those auxiliary heaters. Many states require cabin temperatures to be at a certain level by law for kids to be on the bus. And when it gets to be really, really cold, we shouldn't, you've got to have some solution for that. So in more temperate areas, it may not be as big an issue, but it's certainly an issue in cold weather states like Massachusetts and Vermont, folks in the Northeast along the northern parts of our country.
And that's great to hear that everything is performing well. And obviously now Sergio being in White Plains, he's going to get the same question. So our third panelist today, right out of the great town of White Plains, New York, Sergio Alfonso. And Sergio is I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now. Sergio is the transportation supervisor for White Plains Public Schools. Sergio, in November of 2018, White Plains School District received 5 line electric school buses for a pilot program. And can you share with us the amount, the deployment, your experience with the deployment, but also did you experience the reduced operational maintenance costs, and how had the children in the community, it's a dual question, embraced this type of technology in White Plains?
Sure, Richard, thank you. And thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this panel. Just briefly, White Plains Central City School District is a school district of roughly 60,000 residents, 10,000 students, and we're responsible for the transportation of 7,000 of those students. Throughout the district, we have 5 elementary schools, 2 high schools, 2 middle schools, and 1 pre-K program. So we were lucky enough to deploy 1 electric vehicle at each elementary school, and throughout our 2- and 3-tier system, really service each one of our buildings with the EVs. So first, I'm a satisfied supervisor. The community feedback was just great. We're in an industry where we emphasize service, the quality of the service, efficiencies, and most importantly, safety of our students. So whenever we want to talk about the health and well-being of our students, it's really a no-brainer. So it was an easy sell to the decision makers here in White Plains, and we were fortunate enough to have a great partnership with our provider, and even at the senior executive levels, they were really pushing for this. So community feedback was just fantastic. We got an opportunity to bring it to one of our board meetings. We staged them at several elementary schools before the deployment, and everyone's happy to hear the singing school bus on the way to the bus stop so far.
And if people don't understand what he means by the singing school bus, we have what I call a noisemaker, and we all know that electric buses are quiet. you know, that's one of the first things children notice is how quiet, and they don't have to yell in the seat talking to their friend. But the caveat is when the bus slows down to a certain miles per hour, we have typically a horn outside, or it sounds to me like an ice cream truck, notifying everybody in the area that a vehicle is rolling down the street and coming to a slow speed or to a stop. And to take this a step further, every time I look at the CBS local media video that was done in November, you can hear it when you go on it and you hear the noise. You know exactly right away it's a Lion Electric bus. And you know, to see the smiles on the kids' faces during that video was very, very rewarding. So you know, Sergio, we appreciate your support, and keep up the good work in the EV technology field. Our last panelist today to share some thoughts, the great Michigander that we know of, Dave Mewson out of Zeeland Public Schools. Dave is currently operating 4 vehicles, Lion Electrics, and he has a dual school district where there's a Zeeland East and a Zeeland West. And I hope he shares a little bit about the noisemaker, what he does with that. But Dave, you know, what was your commitment level to EV, and what were the factors to bring electric vehicles into your fleet? Because you're very unique. You have fossil, you have propane, now you have electric. What puts you into the electric platform?
Zeeland Public Schools is on the real West Coast. All right, we're on the west side of Michigan, right on the lake, and beautiful sandy beaches out here. We cover just about 100 square miles. The schools have been considered green schools for a long time. We've put up a number of buildings in the last 20 years, and they're all designed to lay latitude, longitude to take care of, to take advantage, of natural lighting, heat sources, all that kind of stuff. We use the groundwater for heat and for cooling in the summer, on and on. They're everything you can think of. In fact, they're growing blueberries on the roofs. All right. So 10 years ago, I wrote a grant for propane buses. The superintendent at the time, I says, hey, you know, I can put a grant in. We can get a 2-for-1 match, and really, but it's propane. And so we did that. But when I started 34 years ago, the total fleet was propane. The first buses that were ordered the last year of the past supervisor were diesel. And so when I started, we started getting diesel buses with propane. And that's back when you got 2 miles to a gallon. You had the old carburetor, and if you didn't warm up a propane bus long enough, you'd go about 100 yards down the street and everything would freeze up, and you'd have to go out with a coffee pot full of hot water and unfreeze things and go. It's different with fuel injection, so that led us to the grant for 10 propane buses. And then with the VW funds out there, it allowed us to do some other things. So back in 2017, environmental law out of Chicago, Susan Mudd did a program, webinar, to see what kind of interest there was, and talked about electric type vehicles and possible electric school buses. And I attended that, and we had a group of about 17 Michigan districts that put their name on a letter asking the Michigan Public Service Commission to look at ways to possibly fund electric school buses in the state of Michigan. The summer of 2017, when Michigan Association of Pupil Transportation did their summer conference, Lion Bus brought a bus to us. We had a couple other chassis, all right, that were brought, and we started a group just talking about electric buses, and actually gave rides on the Lion Bus at that time, and everybody's like, whoa. And the manufacturers at that time looked at me and said, they'll never see electric buses in Michigan. I said, okay. This was the summer of 17. By October of 17, we did a legislative update type meeting in Lansing, and we did some things in regards to VW was just getting talked about. And actually, Bluebird brought a full-size 84 90 passenger bus up to us, front transit style, rear engine, electric, and the vendor was like, yeah, I didn't know we had this till yesterday. And we took legislators and people on rides with that. At that time, then Michigan Association for Pupil Transportation, which I'm a part of and executive director of, so can we do something together with these districts? And so we started meeting every other month, and the group of 17 dwindled down to like 6. And we got closer to the time of saying, hey, we could, we lobbied back then it was DEQ, now it's called Eagle, our environmental division that was going to take care of the funds. And they set aside like $4 million for electric school bus purchases of the VW funds. Okay, that will cover what we're looking for. Just before the request for proposals were due, DTE said, hey, we'd like to apply for this. And they asked if they could join our group. And they've always told us the more the merrier, the bigger the group. And so we allowed them to, which then added 2 more districts with us. So we went from like 11 or 12 electric school buses up to 20. And they had some pretty stringent demands on type and model, et cetera, that they wanted to do and type of charging. And so we worked our way through that. So we have 11 buses that ended up coming from Lyon to the 5 districts, or let's see, Gaylord and Oxford and 3 Rivers, Kalamazoo and Zeeland, the 5 districts. And then we have the 2 other districts of Ann Arbor and Roseville, and they will get the Thomas bus. They'll get Julie, even though Julie at the time wasn't out there. Thomas, through certain folks in the legislature here, said, yeah, they'll have it, and they're going to do the fast charging system, all right, with the Proterra vehicles, and we are using the regular standard charging system, and we use Clipper Creek as a vendor for our chargers. So we have a grant that we put all together, and for a while it looked like there wasn't going to be enough money, things weren't going to happen, but it was interesting. We put out for bid, request for proposal from the vendors, and they sharpened their pencils pretty well. And so our estimates were pretty high to get into it once we had the actual bids to work from, and even the charging stations. The companies Proterra with the fast chargers and Clipper Creek with the slower charging type stations all made some pretty hefty concessions. And so we were able, Ann Arbor wanted 6 buses. I think we limited them to 4. Roseville wanted 6. We limited them to 3. I wanted more. I got 4. And then each of the other districts got 2. So that helped lower the cost, but the vendors came back with a good process. And we had, this is the bus we would like. And low bids were there, but we made it clear that you didn't have to accept low bid. All right, for us with Lyon, it kind of worked out that way. The Thomas bus, actually, I'm not sure. Again, Rick, did they beat your price just a little bit, maybe?
No idea, Dave. I can't answer that one.
You don't want to remember, okay? But they really sharpened their pencil. And so the main body of the group wanted to get started last fall, and Lion Bus made the commitment in their biz to say, hey, you go with us, everything being equal and things rolling, we should have buses and wheels on the ground in August. Due to different things that happened with the grant and the actual approval of the grant, we couldn't order the buses till a little bit later. And so everybody on the first batch with the Lion type buses, we had them in December. And the buses that are coming from the other vendor will be here coming September, coming October. And they are currently doing their infrastructure and that kind of stuff. So this group met as a committee every month for a long time, and we brought in the different vendors for infrastructure. You had to go back and do reports on temperature and what's happening in your district, what are your costs, etc. And we made people work and do the homework, and we came away saying, all right, we think we can do this. This is what the range needs to be. And then DTE worked with the other 2 schools to say we really want to do a pilot where we can do some, grid, vehicle to grid type stuff, which Proterra allows us to do. And so we can help with some things here. And so that's how it went in Michigan. It's been very successful so far, except that on March 13, our governor said, that's it for schools, you're done. And we've used our 4 buses since then, but only twice a week to go and deliver food to certain locations. And, you know, I've had a couple of school board members actually volunteer to help, and they rode those buses and went, my gosh, these things are just quite something. They're quiet, they don't smell, all that other kind of stuff. They're a nice ride, and nothing but great PR from having the product on site. We had Lion come back and do some things for us in regards to one of the buses and its charging systems. That's been the only issue that we really had, but they actually, it was the folks who have the charging system made, and they sent 2 engineers to sit out here for like 3-4 days with lots of fancy equipment to figure out how come the buses were so smart and telling each other when to charge and not to charge. It was almost reminded me of going back to the movie, all right, watching that yellow Camaro, all right, all of a sudden you had it changed, you know, and the car was smart and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, the buses are smart. They were talking to each other and telling who when to charge and that. So there were some things with their programming, but they worked through it in those days, found it. It's been awesome. You were mentioning 15 cents a mile, that kind of stuff. We've gotten our price down around there too. We're paying about 8 cents a kilowatt hour. And in Zeeland, we are supplied by Munis. So it's a local Board of Public Works. The Zeeland Board of Public Works provides us the power. And they don't care what time of the day we charge. It's 8 cents a kilowatt hour, period. All right. So we can charge all day, every day, whatever. That's what they're going to charge us. But when we figured it all out, we were getting around 15 cents a mile to run them down the road compared to our diesel buses that were in the 40s. Although prices on fuel in Michigan fell this spring considerably. So if I played with some numbers again, it'd be a little different. But before the whole COVID thing, yeah, we were doing pretty well with price and cost. And the drivers love them. You know, we have a bunch of half a days in our system, and I put 2 of the buses on longer routes, 1 on a medium route, and 1 on a short route, and just to test and see how it goes and experience different things. And the drivers, I kind of handpicked the people that take good care of their vehicles and the routes I want them to go on. And it came to the half a day time, and I just figured they'd use regular buses because the 2 longer buses have to charge in the middle of the day to make it. All right, they got a 125-mile range, and they go about 170 miles every day. So those 2, when they get back in the morning, they plug in and they're good to go in the afternoon. The drivers came to me after their morning runs on that first half day and says, "We got this figured out." And I says, "What do you mean?" You know, we got all kinds of spare buses. So use this one. No, we're all going to use electric buses this afternoon, except I'm going to use the one with the shortest route and the longest route. They switched, right? So they switched their own buses just so they could keep electric buses at noon. And I'm like, my gosh, how cool is that? They figured it out. I didn't have to do it. All right. They came to me saying, "May we do this?" And I'm like, "Hey, you got a great mousetrap. Let's try it." And so they've used the buses all the time. All right. So anyway, that's part of my story. And anybody that needs or wants more advice or ideas about electric buses from the state of Michigan, they're welcome to check. I'm hoping to do some of this this coming November at NAPT in Grand Rapids. National conferences in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I hope I see you guys in West Michigan this fall. I hope by that time there's a new normal that we can at least get together.
Well, that's great stuff, Dave. You know, I've had the opportunity to spend some time with you and your superintendent, and I appreciate the fact that you're committed to zero emission school buses. And a testament to the panel today, we've got a lot of Q&A, and I want to start plugging away at those questions and answers. I got the 10-minute warning from Kelsey, and it's my understanding that if I don't abide by that, I'm in hot water. Jennifer and Sergio, I've got a question that I want to present to both of you because I think you can give us some background. Jennifer Riley, in the MA example, are your school buses stored inside or outside? And how's the battery range handling the cold weather? Does it still hold up to the miles that you expect, and are the batteries performing?
So the buses, don't quote me on this, I think all of them were stored outside. So not in covered lots. And in fact, that was another finding, is think about where you want to park your buses, because they're not always next to power. So where you park them. So one of the, so we have stopped evaluating that project, but through the period that we were evaluating, we were not seeing a decrease in range from having the buses outside. You certainly will see a decrease in range just overall in cold weather. So battery range is impacted by cold weather, and you need to factor that in when you're considering your routes. So you will see a reduction in battery range in general, but just for having them stored outside, that didn't appear to impact the batteries in general.
Great. Sergio, you have the similar experience in terms of battery charging in cold weather?
Yeah, to piggyback off what Jennifer just said, we also keep our buses stored outside, and in the winter months we take a really hard look at the metrics, and we're able to change the routes that we do assign those vehicles to. And in the winter, what we do is tend to assign them to some of our shorter routes.
Okay, great. Dave, out in California, I got one for you. What is the range of your buses, and are they long enough for morning and afternoon pickup, or do you require midday charging? I'm sorry, Tim Shannon. I'm sorry.
You know what? We are getting about 95, we have about a 5 to 6% degrade on a hot day because we run the air conditioner all the time. But the buses are getting between 95 and 98% of the promised mileage.
Okay, does that require you for charging midday then per your route?
So we have been charging midday because power is at its lowest rate in the middle of the day in California due to the J curve. So we do take advantage of that charging. Plus, we're trying to use some of our buses for field trips because we do about 4,300 a year.
Very good, very good. We got a great question coming out of Spike Lewis, and all four panelists, you can jump in. His question is similar. What is the effect of hills on the actual duty cycle range of the buses? He's located in Pittsburgh, PA. So obviously we know what he's talking about. Do any of your routes involve hilly terrain? And if they do, are they performing up to your expectations?
So we live in a very flat area in Sacramento, but I will tell you that Rescue School District has a couple electric buses, and they have some serious grades. They're a local neighbor. We loaned them a bus when they wanted to check them out, and they perform very well. And I will tell you, when Nancy drove one of the Lion Electrics back from STN from Reno, she actually gained 40% of the charge coming back down the hill.
Right.
And I think that driving metrics is called hyperpooling?
Hypermiling.
Hypermiling, correct, right. Hey, Dave
in West Michigan, we're kind of flat, but we do have some hills, and the drivers, it's interesting. I wanted to spend a lot of time with them to talk about the regenerative braking, and we did a little bit of stuff on that. But they now were competing with each other to see who could come back with the highest percentage left and all that kind of stuff, and their cost so they were actually taking pictures with their cell phones of the dash, and when they got back, and they were sitting in the break room having coffee and comparing notes with each other, who could drive the fastest, but yet the most economical. Okay, so we've got ours governed at 60. It really can't go any faster than 60, 61. But it's just amazing to watch them try to squeeze just a little bit extra. Talk about cold weather. We've only driven our buses in the cold. We got them in December and we were done March 13. And yesterday was the first 90-degree day we've had in 11 months. So we don't know how far we're going to get to go extra when it's cold out or when it's warm outside, really. So.
Well, we're wrapping up our time allotment, but I've got one question to all four, and this is not a statement specific to Lyon, but do you see your fleets expanding in the electric vehicle technology and school bus? Do you see a future for what you're operating now to the future coming up? Sergio, I'll start with you.
Sure, I'm a big advocate. So in short, yes, if I get my way, absolutely.
Great, and I know, Jennifer, you've got a opportunity up in Vermont. You're piloting a program, so I think that was self-explanatory. But can you share your thoughts on future?
Yeah, I think that for all of the reasons that the folks that have adopted buses have talked about, there's enormous benefits of going electric with school buses, with probably the biggest benefit to the kids that are riding the bus every day. And so I think that there's a lot of momentum in this space. Volkswagen settlement has certainly helped by getting some pilots. States like California that are putting money into the technology is really helping too. So I think as more people see these buses on the road, see how they can perform, the benefits are just going to become more and more clear. And we're going to have even more great examples of how these buses are serving school transportation needs around the country. So I feel very confident that this is going to move forward. You know, we're all a little uncertain in these times, but I think that there's been a lot of good momentum and a lot of good success stories coming from this space. So I'm excited about it.
Well, Jennifer, we really appreciate what VEIC brings to the table when we talk about EV technology and support. Dave Mewson, the great state of Michigan, are we going to see some more electric buses possibly rolling down I-75? Or
I would think we will. We've been leveraging our friends at the Environmental Protection, the DEQ folks are eager to say, hey, we need some more assistance and some funding. The last 2 weeks, they did a revenue sharing conference, and schools are going to take some very large hits in Michigan in the funding sources. And
understood.
So unless the districts have some funds that they've got just for bus purchases, it's going to be very difficult just to buy a regular small bus on gasoline, let alone something with electric. So we're hoping that next round is leftover money from the diesel and propane buses that just got awarded lately, and so we'll have a chance to use that towards electric. And if that's true, we'll go for that and add to our fleet. The drivers are real positive, the community's positive, the administrators are positive, so I would think so.
That's great stuff. And to cap off the end of the panel session today, Mr. Shannon, tell us what you have, Twin Rivers has coming down the pipe, and after you're done, we will say goodbye to everybody.
So we currently have the 30 buses, but we have 27 more on the way, quite a few Lions. We plan on filling our complement of 82 electric buses within the next 2.5 years. Of course, it's contingent on funding, but we're going to continue to lobby with the state and our local politicians to leverage more funding for the air districts and help them meet their goals. But yeah, we look at having at least 90% of our fleet electric.
Great stuff, Tim. That's good to hear. In closing today, I want to thank everybody for participating on the panel. I hope that we supplied some great information in terms of school bus technology on the electric platform. At the end of the day, we have a lot of questions that are unanswered. We did not have time to get to them, but I will make sure that between Daphne's group and myself, we will personally address these questions, whether I have to get my 4 panelists involved or not, but you will not be forgotten. Sergio, thank you very much. I appreciated your help today. Jennifer, always a pleasure. Dave, we'll see you soon, my friend. And Tim, you take care in California, and thanks for your support.
Anytime.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Rick, for being a great moderator. So we'll be moving right along then. Ira, I think we're ready if you're ready.
Okay, Andrea, thank you for inviting me to participate. I'm Ira Dorfman, and I am the Clean Cities Coordinator in Washington, D.C. Our area of jurisdiction includes Northern Virginia and D.C. and parts of Maryland. And electrification has become a large part of our portfolio too. And it's great to be part of this conversation because electric school buses in our area are of great import too. As a matter of fact, we're working with Jennifer on a Mid-Atlantic school bus experience, electric school bus experience program that involves Virginia, DC, and Maryland. And we'll be introducing a lot of school buses to school districts in all three jurisdictions pretty soon. So, between that and our efforts on rideshare, corridors, and hopefully a new comparative analysis coming up with school districts with electric, propane, natural gas, and diesel with one school district in Maryland that we're hoping to launch this year. I've had a lot of opportunity to work with Matthew Getz, who is a senior associate and program manager at the Georgetown Climate Center. Of course, Georgetown is located in Washington, D.C., and Matt's been there for 6 years working on climate change and transportation policy. And Matt's provides staffing support to the Transportation and Climate Initiative, which I think most of you know is the collaboration of 12 Northeastern Mid-Atlantic states and DC, and supports state and federal climate policy development. So I've had lots of opportunities to work with Matt. He's very, very easy to work with and most competent, and sure he'll have some good words of encouragement and summary for this event today. So with that, Matt, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Ira. Yeah, it's really wonderful to join you all today. And I thought this has just been an excellent event on opportunities to accelerate electric school buses. Really inspiring remarks throughout the day and thoughtful panel discussions. I've really enjoyed being able to participate. As Ira said, I'm Matthew Getz from Georgetown Climate Center in Washington, D.C. We were founded at Georgetown University at the direction of state environmental leaders to serve as a resource to states as well as to cities and federal policymakers, and to really work at the nexus of federal and state climate policy. And as I mentioned, a lot of this does include work on reducing emissions from the transportation sector, including the role we play as facilitator of the Transportation and Climate Initiative. And it really is my privilege to be part of this conference today and to learn more about the great progress that so many local leaders are making and the effectiveness of this electric school bus toolkit program that really sounds wonderful and a great thing to have in place. And to join you all in discussing the opportunities to continue working together to reduce global warming pollution as well as harmful air pollution by electrifying our school buses. I know I will be leaving today with some great inspiration and tools, and I hope many of you will as well, along with great connections to help things move forward even more effectively. I think these connections between NGOs and other organizations, businesses, government officials, local and community leaders and school officials are really critical. You know, we've heard about the challenges of transitioning to transportation electrification. I think these barriers are real, and it really does take a broad coalition to move things forward. And so it's great to see the type of participation that's here today and the collaboration that's already underway. So as I said, my privilege to close the conference today, and I want to underscore some of the opportunities to prioritize bus electrification, as well as the importance of local and state government leaders like you all in leading on this policy action. It's really part of the broader role of subnational actors who are leading, not just in their communities, but really showing global leadership in addressing the climate crisis. And finally, I want to share some of the ways that subnational jurisdictions are collaborating across the country, really, in ways that can amplify their impact. So as we've heard today, you know, one of the areas where local and state governments can have a major impact right now is by electrifying our school bus fleets, partially because the scale of the opportunity is so significant. You know, there's over 475,000 school buses in the United States, and at least in non-social distancing times, at least, they provide transportation to 20 million children or more per day. And this really far outnumbers the 65,000 or so traditional public transit buses that are on the roads in the United States. And in a lot of ways, you could say that school buses are our largest public transit fleet. And it might sound obvious, but I think it's really important to note that these school buses provide really important transportation services to families across all different geographic areas, including in many rural and exurban communities that otherwise might have few public transit options. So it's really a great opportunity, and the opportunity is here now. You know, we've heard today about the growing number of options and models from the traditional bus manufacturers that are available to to school districts now. And you know, electric models, we've heard, do certainly have higher upfront costs and other barriers, but they can generate significant fuel cost and maintenance savings, and can also lend themselves to these really innovative financing models. For example, the pay-as-you-save model, tariffed on-bill financing. And they also can create these really promising and interesting opportunities working with electric utilities to monetize the benefits that these electric buses can offer to the electric grid. I think vehicle-to-grid opportunities are really interesting to me, because they can provide valuable grid services, but also to help to integrate renewable energy and to clean up our electricity grid while providing our communities with increased energy system resiliency. And of course, not to be forgotten, and really importantly, electric school buses have been shown to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and early deployments showing 50% or more, even including electricity emissions compared to diesel buses. And of course, this is only going to improve as we move towards 100% clean electricity. So there's an opportunity right now for communities to show leadership and confront the challenge of climate change. And the actions taken now will only improve over time. It sort of goes without saying, and I'm sure you all have seen reports from the IPCC, the US government, scientists around the world that are just abundantly clear that we must reduce greenhouse gas emissions dramatically to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And we know that we need to tackle the transportation sector, which since 2016 has been the largest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. So while the severity of climate impacts that we'll be facing, as we heard earlier today, are no longer in doubt, I think that recent months have only made it more apparent that the effects and the impacts of climate change will disproportionately impact already overburdened communities. And I think that's something that's really important to consider. In addition to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, the actions we take to combat climate change can also reduce harmful air pollution. You know, we've talked today about how particulate matter from diesel engines is harmful to cardiovascular and respiratory health, and really the scary fact that this particulate matter pollution can often be found in higher concentrations on the inside of a school bus, where it directly affects children's lungs, than outside the buses. And so I think we can all agree that in addition to the importance of providing our children with a pollution-free ride to school, that zero-emission buses can also, by reducing tailpipe emissions, really reduce air pollution in our communities and provide some major benefits. And just also to underscore that this transportation pollution is highly concentrated in low-income communities and communities of color. And this concentration, along with the cumulative impacts of pollution, is really the result of historical inequities and policy decisions, whether it's the location of freight corridors or port facilities or highway construction, bus depots, the list goes on. And unfortunately, this unequal distribution of air pollution is receiving some increased attention these days due to the increasingly clear role of air pollution in exacerbating the impacts of COVID-19 and some of the disparities along racial and socioeconomic lines that we're seeing in the ways that this pandemic is affecting communities across the US. But fortunately, reducing air pollution is this wonderful co-benefit of policies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and an opportunity that communities have now by shifting to electric buses and some other zero emission vehicles. And I think that really is part of this broad encouraging news that in response to this dire effect of climate change, that jurisdictions around the world are taking action and looking to phase out some of the dirtiest and most polluting vehicles. In the United States, certainly subnational actors like you all, including from states and cities and regional collaborations, have long been leaders on innovating around climate policies. And this subnational leadership really is written into our federal environmental laws, like California's authority under the Clean Air Act to set more stringent vehicle emission standards. The leadership that California has shown over the past decades, along with the many other states around the country that have adopted California's emission standards and zero emission vehicle regulation, these actions have really advanced American climate policy and have really played a large part in creating the opportunity that we're in now to transition to this lower carbon and zero emission transportation system. And so while the current federal administration is seeking to roll back emission standards, states and cities continue to set these increasingly ambitious commitments, whether it's an economy-wide net zero target like we recently saw from Governor Baker in Massachusetts, a net zero greenhouse gas requirement paired with ambitious climate justice provisions put into law in the New York Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, ambitious electric vehicle incentives and targets like the recent New Jersey legislation, committing to 100% clean electricity in Connecticut, Colorado, Virginia. The list goes on. And of course, California as well, continuing to lead the way with their Air Resources Board finalizing a regulation for public transit agencies to require 100% of transit buses be electric by 2040. And the recently proposed Advanced Clean Trucks rule from California's Air Resources Board. And if that's implemented, it would require around 100,000 electric trucks to be on the road by 2030 and 300,000 by 2035. So, we're really at this wonderful inflection point for medium and heavy duty vehicles, including buses. I should say that other states around the country, more than I can mention here, are poised to support these policies through their own regulatory processes, incentives, policy actions. It's really an exciting opportunity to work with states. I think it's great to see these ambitious policies, not just showing climate leadership, but also creating a really critical opportunity for innovation that can lead to economic stimulus and create good paying jobs in a clean energy economy. And so now I want to just conclude by talking a little bit about how this climate leadership by individual states is further enabled by collaboration between states and cities and across jurisdictions. As Ira mentioned, one exciting multi-state effort that we're happy to support is the Transportation and Climate Initiative, or TCI, which is a bipartisan collaboration between 13 jurisdictions, the 12 Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states from Maine to Virginia and the District of Columbia. And this group has been working together for a number of years on regional strategies to reduce transportation sector emissions. And it's really interesting as both this multi-state and regional collaboration, but also a cross-agency collaboration between energy, environment, and transportation agencies. And the scale of the opportunity from this regional collaboration in TCI is really significant. There are 72 million people in the region. And if it was a country, it would actually be the third biggest economy in the world after the US and China. So any action that that group takes together can really have an outsized impact. And just quickly, the states have been working over the past few years on the development of a regional cap and invest policy to cap emissions from on-road transportation and invest proceeds in lower carbon or more resilient transportation, and reached a major milestone last December with the release of a draft memorandum of understanding and that would outline what this policy could look like, along with some modeling results showing the benefits and costs of the program, both the emissions reductions as well as public health and macroeconomic benefits. And would encourage you all to take a look at this modeling, which includes a number of low carbon transportation investment strategies, including, of course, electric school buses. So while the TCI states continue to finalize the program, would encourage folks to get involved, and please reach out to me if you'd like more information on that front. But TCI is far from the only subnational collaboration that's addressing climate change and transportation. The 10 states have adopted California's zero emission vehicle standard, and they're collaborating through the multi-state ZEV Alliance and working with international partners to further build out the market for electric vehicles. There's other regions around the country where states are collaborating on building out EV corridors, whether it's on the West Coast through the West Coast Electric Highway, or the West Coast Collaborative of states and cities and NGOs working on a regional alternative fuel corridor plan, the 8 Intermountain West governors that created the Regional Electric Vehicle Plan for the West, or Rev West for EV corridors, as well as work around electric vehicle corridor planning in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic through TCI, as well as in efforts led by NESCOM. Another really exciting area where states and cities are collaborating is around vehicle procurement, with the idea of working together to send a strong market signal to the vehicle manufacturers that there's a huge appetite amongst public entities for zero emission options. There's a national initiative that's led by the Climate Mayors Group focused on electric vehicle procurement. This was initially launched by the city of Los Angeles, but is really quickly expanded to now include over 100 cities. And this group works with technical support from the Electrification Coalition to provide leasing and financing options and competitive bid assistance and other support to local governments that's resulted now in commitments to purchase over 2,000 electric vehicles. While this expands or includes a range of vehicles, it does include electric school buses as one of the options. And these efforts really are just part of the broad showing of leadership by subnational governments across the United States. And this really even extends beyond governments. You know, the cities and states are joined by companies and universities and faith groups and others. The We Are Still In coalition that includes over 2,800 signatories of these types of groups, as well as the America's Pledge initiative that committed to honor the US reduction commitments made under the Paris Accord. And this is really a bottom-up movement that you all are a part of, and it's leading to really meaningful progress on addressing the climate crisis and creating less polluting transportation system and healthier communities for us all to live in. And it's really a great pleasure to be part of this conference today and to to speak with you all, really great leaders in the field. I really appreciate the opportunity, appreciate the great work into organizing this conference, and thanks so much for having me.
All right. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Matthew. That was brilliant recap and remarks and additional information. And we thank you so much for joining us and for providing such a comprehensive and interesting recap to the National Conference on Sustainable Development Electric School Bus Toolkit. So we've had such a rich time here together today for the last 3 hours. We started off with Bill McKibben. That was amazing to have his insights and wisdom. Mark Scully introduced our Electric School Bus Toolkit panel that, of course, was moderated so skillfully by Thomas Corman of National Grid, and we enjoyed hearing from panelists Sonia Skindred from Weston and Sharon Huntner from Brantford, and of course, Angeles Papageorge, Executive Director of Operations at Fairfield Public Schools. Matt Masunas from Connecticut Green Bank led, masterfully moderated the legislative panel with Delegate Corey from Virginia and Senator Deignan Jr. from New Jersey. Rick Lee from the Lion Electric Company did a phenomenal job in shining the light on the amazing work that's happening in Sacramento and Michigan and White Plains and Vermont. And we really want to thank Tim Shannon, Dave Meeson, Sergio Alfonso, and Jennifer Wallace-Brodier for being on that panel and providing just those great stories of what's going on. And then, of course, our wonderful closing remarks by Matthew Getz. So we're so glad that you joined us, and this recording will be available if you missed parts of it or you want to review it again. And we're excited now to invite you to join us at our conference reception. So we've sent out a couple of links to join us in our Zoom reception conference, our conference reception. And we'll look forward to seeing you there. And at that reception, what we're really hoping for is to hear, what are your next steps? What are the things you've learned today that you want to act on? How can you support electric school buses in your community? So we want to open it up at our reception. We want to hear from you, and we want to hear what steps you're going to be taking to help support electric school bus adoption. So we will see you at the reception, and thank you so much from all of us at Live Green for joining us today at the National Conference on Sustainable Development Electric School Bus Toolkit. Thank you. See you soon.